Tonight, it's our anniversary episode, and I have completely overbooked it with annuals, one-shots, mini-series, and backups. All that and more tonight on the Not-So-New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 52 of the Not So New 52. I am your host and we have finally done it. We have hit a full year of this show. Our 1 year anniversary has finally come. It has been exactly 52 weeks since I picked up Justice League number 1 and I told you how it went and then swore to you that I would do every single issue in the New 52 on a week-to-week basis. Man, was that a mistake, but regardless, I have kept to it, and in doing so, we have come across some good comics that I otherwise never would have read, some bad comics that I otherwise never would have read, and The Culling and Ann Nocenti's Green Arrow. Those two are really bottom of the barrel for me. Early Legion of Superheroes, dear God, that was a mistake. You know, I shouldn't really be reminiscing about the bad parts that much, but dear God, they stick out like a sore thumb. Anyway, I really just wanted to say thank you so much for everyone who has been checking out these episodes. Whether this is your first or you've been with me since episode 0, I cannot express my gratitude enough that you are willing to sit through my ramblings and ravings about these comics and find even the smallest bit of enjoyment out of it. I really am appreciative. So thank you very much, and I hope to see you on the remaining 200 plus episodes of this show. But as I said in the very beginning, we are overbooked to hell. This episode will be very long comparatively. I don't know how long, but very long. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right into the comics on this one. Let me tell you what's coming out. This week, August 29th, 2012, we have 5 annuals in the form of Detective Comics, Superman, Green Lantern, Justice League International, and The Flash. We also have 2 number 12s in the form of Aquaman and Justice League. We have the beginning of a mini-series of Phantom Lady and Doll Man, and we have a one-shot in the form of National Comics Looker. On top of all of that, I have a cavalcade, an absolute downpour of backup issues that have been collected over the course of the past 3 months that I have to work my way through. I cannot even begin to list them all off. So without any further ado, let's just jump right into it, shall we? Detective Comics Annual number 1, written by Tony S. Daniel, art by Romano, Molenaar, and Perez. This issue is a Black Mask / Mad Hatter issue, and we open up with some cops driving up to Arkham Asylum, and we see Jeremiah Arkham is talking to Black Mask, saying like, oh, hey, remember how we featured you last time in Detective Comics number 9 and I gave you back your mask and then you were knocked out by Batman and put back into our care? As it turns out, that didn't happen. And in fact, he's been hypnotized this whole time to think that Black Mask was here, but he actually escaped that night. So Black Mask hasn't been around in Arkham Asylum. And Jim Gordon shows up and says, yeah, he's been gone. You need to tell me who he's talking to in here so I can put him back in solitary confinement. So then we cut to Batman, who's at a carnival. And there's a new villain called Mad Bull, who's just a really hulked out dude wearing a bull mask, just crashing into everything. And he ends up crashing into a roller coaster that Batman then sees there's a cart coming down, so he throws some batarangs right in the wheel tracks in order to stop it. And then as he looks around for Mad Bull, he gets snuck up on and hit in the back with a full-on wooden beam. So then we cut back to Arkham, and Gordon's talking to Clayface, because I guess Black Mask and Clayface had a thing. And Clayface is like, yeah, I didn't like Roman. He was mind controlling me, but I'm sure as hell not talking to no cops. And Jim Gordon's like, oh, so you're just going to be his bitch then? And he's like, you don't know nothing, Gordon. So then Gordon pulls out Clayface's pain medication, which I guess he has for whatever reason, and Clayface is like, give it to me or I'll kill everyone you love. He's like, or you could just tell me what I need to know. So then we cut back to the carnival, and Mad Bull makes his way to a carousel that has all of the heads cut off of the animals on it. And I guess he wanted them, but Batman sneaks up on him and knocks him out and realizes oh, wait, he was hypnotized. And I'm willing to bet that if I take some samples from him and from those carousel animals, I'll be routed right back to Black Mask. So then we get a short little thing, I guess the next day, where Bruce Wayne rides in on a horse to Alfred, who's just like, hey, here are the samples you wanted. Turns out they match, but nothing about Black Mask. And he's like, oh, well, I'm sure it's somebody that has something to do with mind control or hypnosis. And we pull up a whole horde of people that I guess were part of the False Face Society, which happened pre-New 52, but we're just folding it into continuity anyway. And he explains how it was a whole group led by Black Mask. They all had some sort of mind control power or something like that. And once he went to jail, it all fell apart. So now we're looking for anyone else who has any mind control stuff. And we zoom in on the picture of Mad Hatter and then cut to a circus clown who looks exactly like Mad Hatter. But they're not saying that. They just say, oh, hey, the cops are here at the carnival. They're raiding the place. And this guy named, I don't know, Mr. Dempsey. I think it's Edgar Dempsey. He comes in and he's like, hey, do you know where my bodyguard is? And he's like, oh, your bodyguard hired me to protect you. Right this way, sir. So he leads him into this tent and then knocks him out and delivers him to Black Mask. And what I can only assume is other members of the False Face Society, but they're not all wearing masks because that's what was supposed to be on the carousel animals, were the masks. That's your twist. I don't think it's said until later. So Batman meets up with Jim Gordon, gets some more backstory on how in Arkham Asylum, Black Mask actually went kind of crazy because Edgar Dempsey was the one he left in charge to take care of the masks. And he was supposed to use the masks in order to influence the jury to let Black Mask's normal guy go. What's his name? Sionis, Roman Sionis. So he didn't do that. He got betrayed, and then he had to plea insanity in order to get out of it. And Batman's like, okay, well, if we're talking about mind control, I'm 99% sure Mad Hatter's going to have something to do with it. So they cut back over to the carnival. Black Mask is trying to break Edgar, I'm already blanking on his last name again, Edgar's mind. And they end up throwing him around a little bit until finally he's like, I've built up an immunity, but I'll take you there as long as you don't kill me. And they're like, fine, whatever, let's go. So then we see Tweedledum and Tweedledee get attacked by Batman because he's looking for Mad Hatter. They, I guess, give him up, but we don't see that happen. They just say, yeah, you got nothing on us, Batman. He's like, let's find out. So then we cut to the Gotham Museum of Natural History, and they're making their way through, and they get to an exhibit of a bunch of Native Americans all wearing masks, and they don't look anything like the False Face Society masks. And Black Mask is like, what the hell is this? And he's like, oh, the guy, he experimented on him, he changed him. And then Roman's like, oh my God, you suck so hard. So he tries killing Edgar, and Edgar's like, I can't do that now, I'm under protection. So then he's stabbed through the chest with a spear because Black Mask has other ways of doing things, and all of the people in the display wearing the fake masks, or the real masks, I guess, all start attacking the False Face Society. So it's an all-out brawl, and wouldn't you know it, the circus clown reveals himself to be Mad Hatter. Who would have thought? So then it's honestly a back and forth here so many times, but the long and short of it is that Roman almost gives up his mask because he thinks Mad Hatter has the drop on him, but then Batman shows up, crashes the party, and they even out the battle a little more. They have a literal psi battle where they're just trying to mind control each other. And as they're doing so, Batman comes in, kicks Black Mask in the face, cracks his mask, which then causes this huge beam of light, to which Batman then just reaches out, takes hold of the mask, and then we cut to a day later when Batman says, I don't remember anything after the white light, but somehow I managed to make it out of there, had all of them in custody, and delivered the black mask, actual mask, to you for evidence. And he's like, wow, all right, well, glad we didn't have to wrap up that story. So then we see Roman has been put back in Arkham, and Dr. Arkham is put him in an even smaller solitary confinement cell because he did have some amenities before. And that's it. That really is all there is to it. I had not read, I believe Tony S. Daniel was actually on the actual Batman comic just before the New 52. I might be incorrect on that, but I'm willing to bet that this Black Mask story was like the thing that he was doing right as they transitioned. And I guess he just really wanted to wrap up that. And they were like, look, we can't involve any like pre-New 52 stuff. So they just gave him that one tie-in and then this annual. And they're like, okay, you're good. You told your story. Got it out of your system. I might be entirely wrong on that, but I think that makes sense as to what happened. As for this issue, it's fine. It's an okay issue. Standalone on its own. I wouldn't even say it's really Batman. And once again, from the detective standpoint, like, I don't know. It doesn't really feel like there's any sort of detectiving. And that's fine. Detective Comics doesn't have to be focused on, like, the procedural aspect of it. But it was starting out on that so hard. And now it's just like, I threw Tweedledum into Tweedledee. And then I got some information. Okay, cool. So overall, I'd say this is like a solid 7. It's fine. It's unoffensive. It does nothing particularly wrong, but it's also doing nothing particularly amazing either. It's competent in every way. There are 2 artists on it. I couldn't really tell where the transition happened, so they did a good job at imitating each other at the very least. But yeah, no, it's just a fine annual in general. It's not one to be remembered as an all-timer, but it might be the wrap-up to Tony S. Daniel's previous arc, so if you know of that, it might be worth checking out. Superman Annual number 1, written by Scott Lobdell and Fabian Nicieza, art by a whole lot of people, but mostly Pascal Alixé. So this is Hellspawn and the Daemonites, and it's something. It's dense is what it is. So we open up 3,600 years ago with the Empire of Dame, where this young prince comes in carrying his dead wife and says, "Hey, Mom, remember I told you that our entire race was dying? Yeah, my wife just died in childbirth, as did the kid. So maybe we could do something about that?" And the mom's like, "Hey, shut up. I'm still the queen." And he's like, "We've been mixing our DNA and genetics with all these other races and species, and it's been diluting our bloodline. We need to go back to putting our own people first." And she's like, "Okay, you sound like you're committing treason here, so I'm just going to go ahead and cast you out of my entire empire. You're banished. Goodbye." And he says, I will get back what was taken from us. I swear it." So then we go to Superman now. He's in his apartment. Jimmy Olsen's still crashing with him. And he's looking around like, boy, Jimmy sure is a slob, but, I just love people. I love being around people. I'm going to take the subway in this New York stand-in because I just love being around these people so much. And then he gets to the Daily Planet, and he's like, boy, the Daily Planet sure did love what it used to be, but now it's bought out by a big old company, and now it's not a news station anymore. It's a gossip rag. Boy, I wish Lois Lane could fix things. God, I miss Lois. Hey, is that an alien spaceship? And lo and behold, over top of Metropolis is this giant alien spaceship. And he goes like, all right, let me just use my telescopic vision. She goes, oh, it's Hellspawn. And Hellspawn notices me. He's like, oh, hey, Superman. He's like, oh, I don't know how he could see me, but regardless, runs back down on the subway, changes into Superman, and flies up to the ship. And before he can get there, he reminisces. He's like, I fought Hellspawn before in whatever issue that was. Hopefully I can manage to take him out even with this big ship. But before he could do anything, Hellspawn, who's wearing a different costume, I would say better. It's more menacing for sure. He grabs Superman by the cape and holds him still, and he's like, hey, here's the thing. I create my own atmosphere around me so I can hear you because I know that you're worrying about that you're not able to hear me in space. It's fine. I create my own atmosphere. I know you're the strongest on the planet, and I'm going to beat you up anyway. And he just backhands Superman into the moon. So then Superman sits up. He's like, oh, gee, I got backhanded. I'm going to get revenge for that. And as Superman goes to stand up, he falls back, and he's like, oh, I might have a concussion. Cut to Earth. Starlight Runner Observatory. We meet up with John Jones, who realizes, like, oh, hey, that's a Daemonite ship. Maybe I should contact Stormwatch, aka that book that I was a part of until very recently. And then someone shows up saying, hi, I'm Selu. I work with Hellspawn up there, and your planet must now surrender, Martian Manhunter. And they get into a brief little fight until Selu gets the upper hand, and she's like, haha, our power is so much more. We were going to recruit you to our side, but not anymore. Now you're going to whatever. And they talk about how Hellspawn's just basically looking to rule, not to murder, but also he's definitely going to murder. But it's okay because he's looking after the intergalactic bestiary, which, okay. Then we see Superman is inside of a ship. He wakes up, and it turns out it's Grifter's ship. You know, Grifter, the other Daemonite book. And Superman's like, oh, yeah, Grifter, I've heard of you. Hey, I'm not a huge fan of guns pointed at me. He just melted with his heat vision. And then before they can even, like, start talking, one of Hellspawn's big bads called Biomass rips open the ship they're on. Superman says, hey, you guys take cover. I'm going to seal the ship from the outside because, you know, we're in space. And take Biomass with me. And so he does, and then literally we don't even find out what happens to Grifter. But then he's hit by Biomass again really hard, and it seems to like knock him out again. Cut to on the Florida Keys. There's a place called Kokomo, and Starfire is laying on the beach saying, oh boy, I sure do love being in my book that's also written by Scott Lobdell. And then she's interrupted by a guy named Quam, who Starfire immediately just tries to kill, even though he did literally nothing. And he just grabs her by the neck, says, hey, what do you know about the 13 Scions of Salvation? And she's like, that's a fairy tale. And he's like, psh, shows what you know. That's the only reason that Hellspawn's keeping you alive. And then he just leaves. It's a thing that happened in Red Hood for like 2 panels. I don't know how to explain it either. So then we see Superman still fighting Biomass, and he knocks him into Hellspawn's ship, and Hellspawn's just standing there, and he's like, hey, why do you keep trying to save people? And Superman's like, all of these humans' lives are precious. And he's like, really? Okay, so what about the agents that I put down on Earth that I am currently going around murdering? And he's like, what? Why are you killing your own people? He's like, because I let them live. Now I'm choosing to make them die. What do you got to say about it? And then we cut over to Hawkman, who's attacked by a big red guy named Lord Defile, who once again tells him, like, hey, join our army or else you will be killed. And he's like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to kill you then. But then he's summoned back to the ship, so whatever. They're talking about how the 13 Scions can save the universe and whatever. So then we cut back to Hellspawn talking to Superman. Superman's being held back by 2 lowly Daemonites, which doesn't make any sense to me, but then Hellspawn just kills the Daemonites that were holding him anyway, and then explains this whole thing where he's like, Superman, what about utilitarianism? Would you kill 10 billion to save 100 trillion? And Superman's like, no, every life. And Hellspawn's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. By the way, I'm super old and powerful and a conquester. Do you think I haven't fought a Kryptonian before? And then he recounts how he went to all these planets, and he was the prince. He was Prince Artist from the beginning. In case that wasn't obvious, that was him. And he actually looked human at that point, so it's weird how he evolved into this. Anyway, they went down to Earth at one point, and they discovered that the lowly human population at that point, which had just built the pyramids, had a metagene in them. And that was going to be useful to Hellspawn, so he decided, okay, I'm going to leave some of my people here, and they're just going to like tame the humans to make sure the metagene evolves properly, and then I'll come back to harvest. But it turns out that, you know, they kind of went native, and they didn't really care about the mission anymore. So now that Hellspawn's re-arrived, he's like, no, I'm just going to kill them all, and then I'm just going to take the population anyway. By the way, Superman, I should be thanking you because this population has only turned out so well because you've been defending them. So keep doing what you're doing. Bye. And he's like, Hellspawn, I tore out the power system to your ship. You're not going anywhere. And he's like, ha ha ha, Superman. Actually, I'm the power source. I'm that powerful. Bye. And he just warp speeds out. And Superman's like, oh, and then Hellspawn says something like, by the way, your father would be disappointed in you. Vroom. And he's like, wait a minute, you knew Jor-El? Ah, son of a bitch. Okay, whatever. And then he just sits there for a full page being like, I am so hopelessly outclassed by Hellspawn. Even the Justice League could do nothing. What am I to do if all we're doing is playing into his plans? Oh, what a world. Here's the thing. I like the art. The art looks great. I like Hellspawn's new design. Much better looking than, like, Skeletor. But the writing is so dense and it's just so much packed in here. I get that. I think that Scott Lobdell and Rob Liefeld have teamed up because those are like their books that they're writing together, which, by the way, is horrifying of a concept. But regardless, they're teaming up to tell this Damonite story, and this is like the big start to it of like, okay, he's here and he's doing the thing. But then they wrap up the story and, okay, but I'm leaving and I'll be back eventually. So it doesn't even feel like they're doing anything. It just feels like this was a thing of like, by the way, guys, if you're reading Superman, check out all these other books in which Damonites are prominently featured. By the way, Red Hood and the Outlaws was not actually one of those. But we're including it here anyway. So, I don't know. It's okay. It's not good. And it's definitely not something I'm looking forward to. But in terms of competence, it's okay. So I'm going to give this one a 6 because it's not offensively bad. And they actually made Hellspawn a tiny bit menacing, which has never happened in any of his other appearances. So yeah, I'll give this one a 6, but I'm not happy with the development. Green Lantern Annual number 1, written by Geoff Johns, art by Ethan Van Sciver and Pete Woods. Last issue was issue 12, and it was revealed to Black Hand that Hal Jordan will be the greatest Black Lantern. That's all we know. This issue, it is 2 plots that converge into one, so I'm just going to start with the Hal plot, and we will get to the other one later. So Hal Jordan wakes up, he's buried underground, and Black Hand is the one who buried him there. So he thinks of Carol, and he punches his way out. By the way, his ring is dead, and he manages to get his way out of the ground. And then he gets up, he looks around, he's like, all right, I gotta go find Carol. But then he looks over and sees there's another grave freshly dug for Sinestro. And he's like, all right, I should probably save him. So he starts digging out Sinestro. And then Black Hand shows up and be like, hey, why don't you just leave him? He's a dick. And then Hal's like, I'm going to do it. If you want to kill me already, I'm out of juice. Just kill me already. And he's like, oh, I don't want you dead. But question, what would you do if I offered to let you see your dad again? And we see they're in a cemetery, and his father's grave is right there. And he's like, don't do that. And he's like, oh, but don't you miss your dad? Like, I can easily bring him back. He's like, that won't be my dad. It's like, actually, yeah, it kind of will be your dad, considering that that's your dad down there. So I'm going to start doing that. And he says rise to Hal Jordan's dad. However, apparently, even in death, Martin Jordan has a little bit of willpower, and he's fighting against it. So at this point, Hal's like, nope, stop it. And he tackles Black Hand and bashes his eye into the corner of a tombstone. And Black Hand, of course, not being able to die, is like, all right, yeah, I'm going to kill you now. And so he goes to attack Hal. But Sinestro, having already broken himself out of his shallow dug grave, shoves a shovel into the back of Black Hand's head. And at this point, they start running, and they're like, okay, we need a plan. Hal, where's your battery? And sorry, real quick, I skipped over this line. I really do enjoy this. Sinestro says, after I heard you digging, you were actually trying to save me, weren't you? And Hal goes, and then he goes, but you didn't, and I ended up saving you. Typical. So, yeah, he's like, where's your battery? He's like, oh, it's all the way back at Carol Air. And he's like, is that too far? And he's like, yeah, that's too far for a zombie apocalypse chasing after us. And then Hal's like, wait a minute, you pulled your yellow lantern out of, subspace. Can you pull out your green lantern? And he's like, I could have had a charge, but I don't have a charge. And he's like, well, I have my ring. That's a part of your ring. What if we just both will it really hard? And Sinestro's like, that's not how that works. And he's like, do it anyway. So they touch rings, and, they get enough of a charge that he can pull his lantern out. So then they start doing their oath and start blasting everything in the cemetery. But as they're attacking all these zombies that Black Hand is pulling up, he's just pulling up more because it's a cemetery and there's a lot of them. So at this point, I'm going to stop and go to the other plot, which is the Guardians, who we opened up the issue with of them recounting. They're like, okay, so our first plan was the Manhunters because we thought that emotion was the problem, but then we realized that, they didn't have emotion to stop them from killing everybody. So then we thought that fear was the problem, and we made the Green Lantern Corps. But it turns out that, everybody is a little bit chaotic in all the cores. So in actuality, the real issue is willpower. And to be more specific, free will. We got to take free will away from everybody. That's our master plan. So they say that what they need to do in order to execute this plan is to go to the Chamber of Shadows, which is a giant vault that they keep the First Lantern in. And the First Lantern, they're going to use his power to create the Third Army. And as they're flying through this weird, subspace thing, they see Black Hand has returned in their fight. And it's like, oh, hey, we could use him. Let's keep an eye on him. So then they make it to this vault. They break the chains on it. And as they open it up, inside are a bunch of other Guardians, other people from their race. And they're like, hey, did you do it? Did you save the universe? Is everything okay out there? And he's like, no, we're still working on that. We need the First Lantern. And they're like, but we're in here to guard the First Lantern because he is so unbelievably powerful and could kill us all. And they're like, yeah, but we need it to save the universe. And he's like, I don't think it's a good idea. And then the Guardians are like, step aside or we're going to kill you. And he's like, okay, well, I guess we fight. So big fight between the Guardians and the other people of the Guardians race. And at a certain point, they, Elder, the one in charge, he's like, remember, brothers and sisters, remember our oath. He has to stay here. And then one of the Guardians sneaks up and literally just slices his throat open, killing him. And the energy within him was so powerful, it cracked open the vault within the vault that was holding the First Lantern. So they go inside and they see him there. And he's like, hey, someone out there? Please let me out. And he's like, no, you're too powerful. But we are going to take you, we're going to take your little mini vault outside of this bigger vault. We're going to take that with us. So then the other Guardians around are like, oh my God, they killed him. They've gone crazy. What's going on? And at that point, the original Guardians are like, I say original, the ones that we're familiar with are like, okay, we're going to lock you all back in here again so you don't interfere with us. Bye. And then they lock the bigger vault and make their way through subspace carrying along the First Lantern, where again, they're able to look outside and they see Hal and Sinestro launching an attack on Black Hand. And they're like, oh, that might actually be a problem because we need Black Hand. All right, we got to deal with this part now. So a Guardian just comes out of subspace and stops their attack on Black Hand. Then they all show up and start supercharging Black Hand. And he unleashes a giant energy blast. And they're like, yeah, Black Hand, go ahead and just kill them. We just need them dead. And Black Hand's like, all right, I'm not going to turn that down. So he blasts them and they're being dragged away into this big death portal thing, and the rings start thinking that they're dead. And Hal's like, are we dying, Sinestro? And it's like, seems that way, Hal. And they're clinging to the ground. And it's like, okay, well, our rings are going to fuse back together into one ring when we die, and when that happens, it's going to search for someone new. It has to be someone like me, says Sinestro. And then Hal's like, no, you're a dick. It has to be someone like me. So they're both arguing. They're like, focus, we got to think of the type of replacement that we want for our ring, which I guess is a thing they can do. But lo and behold, they get dragged back into the ring. Hal's last word is Carol, and they both die, and the ring fuses back together. It says error over and over again, but then it says scanning for closest sentient replacement, and then it just goes off. And the Guardians are like, cool, Black Hand, thanks for the save. You work for us now. And he's like, no, I don't. I work for Death. And he's like, okay, well, then we're just going to put you in that vault like we did our other Guardians. And so they just teleport him in there and say, we'll get you back out when we need you. So at this point, they reveal their plan. It's like, okay, Hal and Sinestro are dead. We're going to kill Guy Gardner and the Green Lantern Corps. And then we'll take care of Kyle and the other Lantern Corps. And then the Third Army will rise. And then we get the epilogue, which is the one that's drawn by Pete Woods. And we see that in this cemetery, they are siphoning off power from the First Lantern. And he's like, this is my power, don't take it. And he's like, no, we gave you the power in the first place, so we're going to take it. And he's like, no. So they start siphoning off his power, and it starts overcharging them to the point where they're all blistering and disgusting looking. And they all start collapsing to the ground. And they're like, okay, we got enough power, do it now. And they all put their hands in the middle of a circle, and some blue goop starts coming off of them, like part of their own biomass. And it starts crackling, and electricity starts forming into a humanoid shape that looks like pretty much your standard gray alien. Like no mouth, big white eyes, a bit bigger and bulkier, but that sort of feel for it. And at that point, it's like, all right, cool. This came from us, and it's one with our minds. We're able to control it. And then, wouldn't you know it, the lowly cemetery guard finally shows up, and he's like, hey, everything good over here? Oh, what's that? And then this thing goes off, it attacks him, and it just assimilates him. It turns him into another member of the Third Army. The only remaining thing of his intact is his eyes. His heart was literally expelled from his chest. His mind belongs to the Guardians. His eyes are the only thing that still look like him. So it's like, okay, here's the plan. Original guy that we made. You go off into the universe, and you create our Third Army. New guy, cemetery guy. You stay here on Earth, and you do the same thing. Assimilate as many people as you can. And by the time anybody realizes what's up, it'll be too late. Because we're basically doing Zombie Apocalypse Part 2. All good, great, cool, bye. And then we end with a shot of the first lantern still inside of his cage and very angry. And that's it. And he's just a silhouette, by the way. He's no identifying characteristics. I like it. I mean, I'm not going to say I don't like it. It's definitely a very well-written thing. Sets up the entire Green Lantern line moving forward for at least the next 8 to 9 issues. Well-written, well-drawn. I really don't have many complaints about it. If I really had to pick one, it's that between the last issue to now, seems like, I mean, they were passed out, so I guess it makes sense that they were buried underground. Like, Black Hand just did that. But it's weird to me that he buried these people underground, and then when Hal got out, Black Hand was like, oh, I didn't want to kill you. So it's like, okay, well, then you maybe don't bury him under, like, he could have still died under there. That wasn't a given that he was going to get out. Either way, that's a nitpick. I do genuinely enjoy this. Overall, I'm going to say 9. I think that it's well enough done. I'm not personally that invested in the Geoff Johns run, having not read anything prior to the New 52, but I can definitely see the importance of this issue in that Hal and Sinestro are dead and the Third Army. Like, this is the end game of Geoff Johns' run, and I'm interested. And I can recognize high quality work when it's there. So I'll give this one a 9. Even if personally I would put it at like 8.5, but you know, from one to the other, not that big of a deal. Aquaman number 12, written by Geoff Johns, art by Ivan Reis. Last issue left off with Black Manta getting his hands on the 7th relic that sank Atlantis. And this issue picks up with Mera, who was abandoned after Black Manta teleported away Stephen Shin, picking up a phone, who I guess belongs to her? I genuinely am unclear as to whose phone this is, but regardless, it's Operative calling, saying, hey, Mera, we think we know where Aquaman is. We need to meet. How fast can you swim? And she's like, faster than Aquaman. Boom, takes off. Immediately goes and meets up with Operative. Literally, like, jumps out of the water and just lands on his ship in the sky. And just starts talking. And basically, she's like, hey, I don't trust you guys because ever since Jungle Lady showed up, he's been acting weird. And Jungle Lady's like, her name's Yawara. She's like, what do you mean ever since you met? Aquaman's been acting weird ever since she met you. You're the one who's weird. And everyone's just kind of debating, like, why is Aquaman doing what he's doing? Why is he pushing everyone away? And, like, what is he actually trying to do here? The one thing they can agree on is he's definitely going after Black Manta. So they all are converging on that location. Meanwhile, while there, we see that Black Manta's got his hands on the scepter, and he's like, cool, with this I can finally beat Aquaman because it's the most powerful of all the things. And Dr. Shin chimes up and he's like, whatever you're planning, Black Manta, Aquaman will stop you. And we get a little flashback from Arthur of him talking with Dr. Shin when he was a kid, and he jumps into a pool filled with fish, and they all listen to Aquaman's commands and whatnot. And then we come back to present. Black Manta's like, all right, well, we've gotten all we need from you, Dr. Shin. Kill him. And as they go to do so, Aquaman uses Trident and kills a couple of Black Manta's goons. Big fight breaks out. Black Manta's using the scepter to cause mass chaos in this cave. The whole thing's collapsing down around him. Aquaman gets buried under some rubble, and as Black Manta's about to do a finishing strike, the others show up, and they all start attacking. And at that point, Mera comes after Aquaman. He's like, hey, what are you doing? Why are you pushing me away? And Aquaman's like, I'm not who you think I am. And she's like, I know all about your dad and how you killed Black Manta's dad. And he's like, there's more. And she's like, all right, well, it's going to have to wait. But, I do want to know. So Yawara goes after Dr. Shin because she still believes that he's evil. Volstock jumps in the way, and it's just like, no, he's unarmed, and he truly does regret his actions. And Dr. Shin's like, I truly do regret my actions. So at that point, Aquaman's like, all right, let him live, whatever. So the whole cave's still coming down. Aquaman tells everyone, get out, get Shin clear. I got to take on Black Manta. Black Manta, however, sneaks up on Aquaman, is about to do a finishing blow. So Volstock jumps in the way and takes the blow for him. And Black Manta sinks off in the darkness, just going like, one by one, Aquaman, they're mine. Aquaman consoles Volstock as he's dying. And Volstock's like, oh, Arthur, you got rid of my greatest fear. I'm not dying alone. I'm surrounded by my friends. And then he dies. And everyone's crying over it, including Aquaman. And he's like, all right, that's it. Final straw. I'm going to kill Black Manta. Dun, dun, dun. And that's going to pick up in issue 13. It's good. It's a solid thing. I want there to be something more to this. I don't know what. I don't know. It just feels like there's something missing. Maybe I feel like it's on Aquaman's side where he's just doing this thing where he's like, no, nobody gets hurt because of me. Like, I'm sure they're building up to some sort of a reveal as to like exactly why he feels that way, but clearly, like, he was feeling this way the entire time that the Volstock thing, or not Volstock, the others have been going on. And Volstock's like the one who actually got hurt. I don't know. It doesn't feel justified to me yet. Like, he brought Mera down into the trench. Like, that just happened. That wasn't something he was concerned about her safety. But suddenly now, oh no, nobody can work with me. I'm too, I don't know, angry? I don't know. I feel like it just hasn't been justified enough. Maybe that'll be in part 13. I don't know. We'll see how it gets there. I did like this issue, though. The art, fantastic the whole way through. Seriously, it looks great. So overall, I'm going to give this one a 7.5 because what I want for the book doesn't mean that it's a bad issue. It just means that I just want this one little bit of explanation. And maybe in the stuff we've already seen, it has been explained where, Arthur was just an angry guy. He's always been an angry guy, and he just doesn't want anyone else wrapped up in that. And that's all the explanation we get. Fine, so be it. But I just want there to be a little bit more. So 7.5 for this, and we'll see how it wraps up on the 13th issue. The Flash Annual #1, written by Geoff Johns, art by various people, but it's broken up by chapters, so I'll just say who did each chapter. So, open up Chapter 1, art by Marcus Toe, is pretty much just a let's get it set up chapter where Barry, 2 hours ago, was out in some salt flats in, I believe, Utah, and he's there with his dad when he was a kid, and they were looking to see some supercars race and some motorcycles, whatever. His dad was super excited, hoping they'd see a world record. Turns out they didn't, and his dad was disappointed, wanting to be part of something bigger, part of something special. But Barry remembers how, like, he was just happy to be there with his dad. And so Barry goes running across these salt flats, and he's like, okay, when you get caught up in the speed, you sometimes forget some other things, and he realizes that Dr. Elias betrayed him because he got so caught up in the speed. So now he's going to go talk to Dr. Elias, which we saw happen last issue 12. So Chapter 2, art by Scott Collins. We see the Rogues back a year and a half ago. They're just robbing a bank. It's got Trickster, Weather Wizard, Heatwave, and Captain Cold, and they're all just fighting the cops, and Captain Cold's narrating and saying how they have 3 rules. Rule 1, no killing. Rule 2, no drugs. Rule 3, keep it about the score. Keep it about whatever they're trying to get. Don't overcomplicate things. And as they are attacking these cops, Barry rushes in. He stops all three of them and goes to grab the money. But in the time that he's going to grab the money, Mirror Master manages to grab the rogues and pull them into the mirror dimension, allowing them to escape. And Flash is like, oh, well, whatever, I'll get him again. So then we see later on that Captain Cold is pissed that the score didn't go right. Trickster was apparently supposed to be lookout, and he just wanted to be part of the action. And he's like, well, at least I'm a rogue. Why do we even keep Captain Cold's sister around? Her name's Lisa. And apparently she's dating Mirror Master, Sam. And they're like, okay, you're out of line, Axel. Trickster, you're out of the rogues. So they kick him out, and then Captain Cold drunkenly stumbles around later on that night. He does a quick smash and grab at a pawn shop. And as he's moping, Dr. Elias steps up, and he's like, hey, it seems like you're having a tough time. I'm betting it was you battling the Flash earlier. I think I can help you. And he's like, why would you do that? And he's like, I just want to see what's going to happen. I just want to do it for the sake of scientific progress. So they strike a deal. Chapter 3, art by Diogenes Nevis, follows Golden Glider. And she is comatose, and her form that we see is an astral projection. And she recounts how we got to this position of after Captain Cold talked to Dr. Elias, he got a genome and recoder, which is going to allow them to take the powers of their guns and weapons and stuff and merge it into themselves and become superpowered. And everyone's like, that sounds really dumb. But he says, all right, but I'm the leader of the rogues. I make the decision. Everyone do it. So Trickster, who's out of the rogues now, is just Mirror Master, Weather Wizard, Captain Cold, and Heatwave. Lisa starts walking away from the group, but as they start powering up the machine, they feel this surge of power, and then they realize, oh, it's too much. This thing's going to blow. And it does. It explodes, and it knocks out Lisa in the explosion. We see Heatwave's on fire. Weather Wizard is being rained on, and Captain Cold's like practically frozen himself. And then Lisa has her ghost basically coming out of her body, and no one else is able to really see her. Captain Cold goes over, sees that she's practically dead, and freezes everyone around him in a fit of rage. And then we see Lisa. She's like, yeah, no, like, I'm still alive. It took me a while to come back, but my body is comatose, and I'm never going to be able to physically walk around again. And Sam, my boyfriend, he lost the most. He is trapped in a mirror dimension that he's unable to escape from. So that's that. Chapter 4, The Secret. It is art by Marcio Takara, and it is Patty Spivot, who came in to run a blood test on a person who has no idea who he is, and it's Turbine from like an arc ago when Barry went to the Speed Force. And he is no memory of anything. He's completely blank slate, and he's like, yeah, I mean, if you want to go ahead and help me. But as they are taking the blood, they get a news flash on the TV about the stuff going on with the rogues and Flash down at the monorail from issue 12. And as soon as Turbine hears the flash, he's like, wait a minute, hold on. Patty Spivot, the Flash. Oh my God, it's all coming back to me. Patty, I know where you can find Barry Allen. So that's that. And then chapter 5, the final one, art by Wes Craig. It's just picking up right where issue 12 left off. Captain Cold's come in, and Dr. Elias has a shard of mirror in his brain, and Pied Piper's knocked out. And Pied Piper, you know, he's still knocked out. It doesn't seem like he's going to die, but Dr. Elias is definitely going to die because Flash is having trouble getting the shard out of his brain. Captain Cold comes in, puts him on ice, says, look, worry about your doctor later. We got to go take care of the rogues. And Flash is like, I'm sorry, we? He's like, yeah, no, they betrayed me. I'm on your side now. So it's Captain Cold and the Flash against the rogues, but immediately they're separated because Golden Glider takes Flash and throws him into the mirror dimension, where Heatwave and Weather Wizard then come in, and they all start ganging up on him. Meanwhile, out in the real world, Captain Cold and Lisa are having it out, and he's like, hey, I don't know why you thought that you could do this. Like, I'm your brother. Like, how dare you? The rogues were mine. And you also are, you're shooting way too high here. This is just the rogues are just about stealing stuff. This is too much. And she's like, okay, but you're not a rogue anymore. You're out, so shut up. So they keep fighting. We then see that Flash is still having an ultra hard time. Mirror Master uses the mirror dimension to start coating Barry in mirrors so that he can then shatter him. But before you can do that, Flash uses some Speed Force energy, blasts it all off of him, grab Mirror Master's gun, which I guess he still needs, and then makes a portal to take him, Weather Wizard, and Heatwave all back into the real world. And as soon as he arrives, Captain Cold knocks him out with an ice gun. And he's like, yeah, no, I told Flash that I owed him for saving my sister before. However, I owed him by saving Dr. Elias's life. That's what I did to repay him. So I just strung him along in that I would fight you guys. I want to be leader of the Rogues again. You guys, like, you're shooting too high. You're shooting too big. I'm a good leader. I know how to do this. Let me be the leader again. And before they can do anything, some pods start falling out of the sky all over Central City. And out of them comes the gorillas. And all led by King Grodd. And they say, Flash, Central City, for the crimes against my people, you will bow to King Grodd. So we got Grodd back and the Rogues. And, oh boy, there's a lot going on. This is a dense one. So I like it. I definitely did enjoy it. I think the chapters work decently well, but you definitely could just... Like, I think that the issue itself, if this weren't an annual, like if this were just issue 13, I think it would just be that chapter 5. It probably has enough pages, honestly, to just be that. But then once they realized, oh, wait, this is an annual, they decided to add in, okay, we've got backstory that we can then apply here. We can be able to show, like, how did the Rogues get to how they are? And that doesn't feel crucial to the plot, but it is good to have in this scenario. So definitely enjoying this. Have no idea how it's going to turn out in Rogues v Flash v Grodd. It's a lot happening there. So interested to see where that'll turn out. But this particular issue, I'm going to go ahead and give I'll give it a 8. I think it's good. It's very well done. Exceeds expectations, but still not, the best. It's not blowing me out of my chair. It's just a very, very good issue. Justice League number 12, written by Geoff Johns, art by Jim Lee, Ivan Reyes, Joe Prado, and David Finch. Last issue left off with everyone seeing ghosts of dead relatives. This issue picks up with a recap of the arc as a whole, and it's being told from the perspective of everyone who saw the broadcast of Wonder Woman and Green Lantern getting in a fight. And basically it's coming down of hey, do we still trust the Justice League? Because clearly they are just as dysfunctional as anybody else. And they go through the whole history of Steve Trevor and how he was dating Wonder Woman and now he's a liaison and he works for Argus. And then David Graves and how he had a family that all fell terminally ill, but apparently he didn't actually die. And then we get to the story proper, where they're looking at the ghosts, and Wonder Woman's looking at the ghost of Steve Trevor, and Steve's like, hey, you were too late. Now please leave. I have to move on. And everyone else is talking to their respective ghosts, and they're like, this probably isn't true, guys. Everyone's aware of that. And they're like, yeah, totally. But what if it is? And Cyborg gets the weirdest one because he's seeing a ghost of himself, and the ghost is like, you're not the real me. You're just a machine that thinks it's me. The real Vic Stone died. So that's a cool one. But regardless, as they're talking to these ghosts, they transform into more demonic forms, and they start leeching off and attacking the League, and everyone's freaking out. They're like, oh God, what's going on? What do we do? And Graves finally steps in as they're all being weakened. And he's like, I hated you, but now I kind of feel sorry for you, because after everything that I just saw, you are literally just like the rest of us. You aren't anything special, but I'm destroying the Justice League, but I don't hate you. I can't let anybody else put their faith in you. That's the whole point of this. But as they're doing so, as he's taking them all out and putting them under some weird magical ice thing, he gets shot, and it doesn't do any real damage, but we see that it's Steve Trevor who didn't actually die, which means that everyone immediately comes to the conclusion of wait a minute, that means that the ghost wasn't Steve Trevor, which means these aren't real ghosts, which means screw it, I have no guilt, plah, and they all just fight against these little demonic things that are attacking them. And Steve says, I broke out of my restraints and I've just been wandering these halls and I've had these weird spirits chasing me. But I saw you, so I'm here to help. And Graves is like, nope, this only works if you're dead, so now I got to kill you. But then Wonder Woman steps up and they all start attacking Graves. And at this point, Batman's like, hey, Superman, try heat visioning him. And he blasts Graves. It doesn't seem to do anything. But Aquaman steps in, and he's like, well, even if he's made of magic, he can still shatter like ice, and he uses his trident to start breaking apart Graves' like outer shell. To which everyone's like, it sounds like when we're breaking him that those are like the screams of children. Maybe we should stop. And Batman's like, we can't stop. Keep going. And eventually his entire outer shell crumbles, and the weird little demon spirit things, which they do say on one page here, are, what are they called? Prada, I believe they said they were. Pradas, which are apparently spiritual parasites. So the ones that were feeding on Graves end up flying away, and he just collapses and he's back down to being an old man. And he's like, oh God, why? Just kill me. You've taken away my family again. And Batman's like, yeah, but those weren't your family, and I think you knew that, didn't you? So 24 hours pass. Steve Trevor is in intensive care unit, and Wonder Woman comes up and is just like, I'm sorry, Steve. You're hurt because of me, because I'm so close to you. And Steve's like, you bitch. You're not close to me. The only time that I've seen you in the past year is through a computer. You quite literally could not be more distant from me. And it's like, still, I have to keep my distance from you. That's why we're going to be requesting a new liaison to the Justice League. And she's like, you think that I'm liaison because I just want to be near you? I thought of all people, you wouldn't think that I'm this little puppy trying to follow after you. I'm the head of Argus, goddammit. Nah, go away, Wonder Woman. I don't even want to talk to you. Get out of here. Go on, get. So then we get Graves is in Supermax or whatever like that, but we'll get back to him. And then we see the Justice League who's looking over the news reports from like the beginning and hearing all these people who are now doubting the Justice League and their ability to do anything. And they talk about it. And it's Batman, Flash, Cyborg, Green Lantern, and Aquaman. Superman and Wonder Woman are not present. And they're basically just talking through like, yeah, no, maybe like Graves, they were the only people to survive out of a group that were attacked that day when Darkseid showed up, but they breathed in ash. And maybe we should have caught that. Maybe we made a mistake. But it's like Graves said, we're not gods. And we go down and we try to save everybody, but we can't save everybody. We just do as best we can. But it's still a goal that the Justice League should have. We still need to aspire to something higher. So, in the end, the result that they came to was Green Lantern decided, because of the footage that was shown, he was the one who started the fight with Wonder Woman. He has to be the scapegoat. So he's leaving the Justice League, and they're all going to like blame him for the stuff that happened. And after that, they can start to be better. They can start to work more as a team and like aspire to what the Justice League should have been in people's eyes. So he resigns and he leaves. But then we cut to Wonder Woman, who's just sitting on top of a building. Superman comes by and notices that, you know, she's alone, and they just talk for a while about how complicated human relationships are, how in order to keep the people around them safe, they have to keep them distant. And as such, they both just feel so alone, so isolated from everybody else, no matter how close they want to be. And in this moment, they share some vulnerability, and they lean in, and if you couldn't tell by the cover of this issue, they kiss each other. Superman and Wonder Woman, romantic couple, for the rest of the New 52. I know that happens. So, yeah, they're a thing. Last little page we got here is Amanda Waller visits David Graves in prison, leaves him a typewriter and says, hey, how about you write me a book called How to Defeat the Justice League? That'd be nice. I'll be back later. And he walks over to the typewriter, wheels himself to the typewriter, and starts typing The Villain's Journey by David Graves, which, by the way, is the name of the arc. Get it? It's a thing. So then the last 3 pages are all just teases of things coming up. Not really get too much into it. There's a Shazam thing. There's a traitor in the Justice League. And the big thing coming up is because the Justice League cannot be trusted, they have to form the Justice League of America, which will be written by Geoff Johns and David Finch, and have people like Martian Manhunter, Hawkman, Green Arrow, Catwoman, Steve Trevor, and a couple other people. And that's the thing. It was good. I think that the Villain's Journey as a whole was mediocre. I think right up until this last issue. I think this is where it really all coalesced, when Graves really laid out of like, no, like, I don't care if like you guys live or die. It doesn't matter. I just don't want anyone to have any false hope in them. That, I think, really did tie it all together. I think that was a good way to like mark it down and say like, no, this is what this villain was doing, because it was really kind of amorphous the whole way through as to like what did he actually want to achieve. But once he laid it out, I think it was an interesting idea for a villain to say like, no, like, yeah, like whatever with you guys. I was let down by you guys, and I don't want that to happen again. So it's an interesting concept. Art-wise, pretty fantastic across. I do got to say, sometimes Jim Lee, he, especially in this first half here, he gets a little bit too scratchy for my likes, but it's still good. It's still solid art. So overall, I'm going to go ahead and say, 8.5. It's actually very well done. Maybe not the arc as a whole, but at least this one issue it is. Whether you like the Superman or Wonder Woman thing, it's done well. And Green Lantern resigning was also a good idea. Like, overall, I like it. It's solid. So, yeah, I am definitely interested to see where we're going from here. But next issue is Justice League Zero, which is a Shazam-only issue. So we'll be picking up this plot in Justice League 13. Justice League International Annual Number 1, written by Geoff Johns and Dan DiDio, art by Jason Fabok. It's the last issue. This is wrapping up everything, and who boy do they wrap it up. By the way, spoilers for Justice League number 12, if you haven't checked that one out. So, this issue opens up with some country in Central Africa. A warlord has taken 5 UN inspectors captive, and despite trying to find peaceful situation out of it, Justice League International has been called in order to solve the scenario. And so Green Lantern's just hovering over the ground menacingly, saying like, hey, isn't the actual Justice League supposed to show up to this booster? And Booster over the comms is like, they're just running a bit late, they're definitely on their way. And he's like, I don't believe you, but okay, let's deal with this. So OMAC shows up, and the whole rest of the team's doing whatever. And then we see the warlord, his name is Mukasa, and he's holding the hostages next to him, and Batwing swoops in, who I believe said he wasn't on the team as of last issue, but I guess they figured, oh wait, we're canceled, so may as well stay on the team for a little bit. And he swoops in, grabs Mukasa, saves the hostages, but then Mukasa is wearing a vest that is laced with explosives, and he presses the button and he explodes because he would rather die than be taken in and sentenced to death their way. So at that point, Booster's like, guys, we're supposed to bring him in alive. And it's like, whatever, dude, we saved the hostages, who cares? Who cares? We're doing our thing here. It's like, yeah, but we need to impress the UN. It's like, who cares, Booster? We are D-list. No one cares what we do. So it's like, all right, fine, whatever. Anyway, get back to DC. We've got visitors. So at this point, Batwing chooses to stay behind because he's something with the League of Assassins is apparently wrapped up in this. I don't know. But as they're leaving OMAC, something tweaks in his eye, and Brother Eye, a.k.a. the thing that controlled him for so long, is overwriting his actual just human self. So he's currently being overridden as they all fly away. And then as the group reaches back to DC, Booster explains, hey, despite the fact that we failed entirely, the UN is impressed enough that they approved my plan to expand the team. And we have 2 new members, Blue Beetle, as seen in Blue Beetle, and the Olympian, who is, I guess, original. I mean, apparently he came from before the New 52, but he's a god, but not actually. So anyway, Guy sees this and he's like, all right, I'm a bounce, I'm out of here. And Booster's like, wait, what? Why are you leaving? He's like, dude, you lied. You said that the Justice League was coming. Here's the thing, though. I'm not going to be a part of whatever sort of political agenda you've got. Clearly, you're doing this for, fame and, to be noticed rather than doing this for the right reasons. I'm not here for that. And Booster's like, that's not what this is. And he's like, yeah, no, definitely not what it is. I'm leaving. So he bails. Godiva apparently had a history with the Olympian, and Olympian's like, I sold you out to the gods once before so that I might gain power, but I gave it all up to be back with you. Let me love you. And she's like, nah, that's not going to happen. And then Blue Beetle's like, hey, is Cyborg going to be here? Because I kind of, I got a technological question about alien tech grafted in my body, and I think Cyborg would know what's up. And Blue Booster Gold comes in and says, Omac's also doing with his own technological stuff. Don't worry, we'll help you out. You're safe here as long as you're part of the team. And then it's like, by the way, where is Omac? He left down to the archive room, so August General goes down to deal with him. And Booster's like, oh boy, starting of a new Justice League. So as August General goes down to find Omac, turns out he's actually in the security room. And as he goes to tap him on the shoulder, he gets electrified. And it's like, oh, okay. So Kevin's been overtaken by Brother Eye. It's time to fight against him. And immediately Omac just turns around, grabs August General by the neck and be like, yeah, you're not going to survive through this. So the rest of the team's walking down the halls trying to find where they went to. And we see Omac standing there with the headless body of August General. And turns out he is still alive, but he's in an intense amount of pain. So at that point, everyone's like, okay, big battle time. Booster Gold tells Blue Beetle to shut down the uplink because that was the whole thing that Brother Eye was trying to do. And he's trying to get his body... Sorry, Brother Eye is trying to get his programming out of this body and back to the satellite that Brother Eye previously existed in. And as to do so, he has to uplink with the satellite. So Olympian goes in first. Omac just knocks him on his ass. At that point, Godiva attacks. He knocks her on her ass. And he's doing it by reading through, history files and the files that they have on each of these heroes in order to find their weaknesses. Booster Gold then goes for the attack and he realizes, oh, I don't have yours because you came from the future, but you're also definitely just a dick who's in this for the fame and fortune and not actually in it. Why did you not memorize the stuff in the future that would help you combat actual disasters if you weren't in it for just fame and fortune? He's like, shut up, I'm doing my best. So at that point, Blue Beetle steps in, and he actually has the power to take on Omac for a little bit, but he is still able to read Blue Beetle's file, and he uses his link with technology, Omac does, to send Blue Beetle through a portal back to the Reach homeworld, which is not what's going on in the Blue Beetle book at the moment, so I am very confused as to how we're going to square that circle, but regardless, Godiva and Booster Gold, they get up. They run into one of the safe rooms, and they're like, okay, just got to wait for the Justice League, right, Booster? That's all we got to do? And Booster's like, yeah, no, Justice League isn't coming. I lied. They don't even know we exist. Oh, we're screwed. I'm sorry. I'm such a fraud, Godiva. I'm a horrible person. And then Godiva kisses him, and she's like, hey, we all have our issues. Just let's try to deal with this. So Booster takes on Omac one-on-one while Godiva gets August General out. And he uses his 20th century technology to overwrite part of Omac's thing so that it's actually a virus that's corrupting him. So Brother Eye has to leave Kevin's body in order to continue to survive. And so he does so and uplinks himself to the satellite, thus allowing him to perpetuate. And so then he's like, all right, well, guess I did it, but hold on. Everything's frozen in time. What's going on? And he looks behind him and sees a future version of himself stop in. And he's like, hey, here's the deal. I'm you. I'm from the future. I've come back because you need to get to the Justice League and stop them from, doing this thing, or else everything is going to be wiped out. We'll cease to exist. And the future Booster, looks up on the monitor and sees Superman and Wonder Woman kissing from the end of Justice League 12, and he just starts to fade away. He's like, no, this can't happen. Don't let this happen. And then Booster from the current time looks up and he's like, wait a minute. Is this what I'm supposed to stop? Is that what I'm doing? What's going on? And he fades away as well. And in the end, Booster's gone. So then we cut to Batman, who's in Star Labs, looking over Kevin, who's being treated by Silas Stone, trying to figure out what's going on with him. And as Batman's leaving, he's like, hey, is there... what happened to Booster and Blue Beetle? And it's there's no trace of them at all. They just vanished. Godiva and August General survived. And future Booster actually mentions how they're going to be forming a new team called the Global Guardians. And that's going to be their purpose. But, as for Booster and Blue Beetle, they just vanished. And so as Batman's leaving, he's stopped by some monitors that have Brother Eye on it. And Brother Eye says, like, hey, Batman, I know that you're my creator, but I have a new programmer now, and that new programmer is going to kill you. And Batman's like, yeah, all right, whatever. I've been threatened before. Whatever, Brother Eye. And Brother Eye's like, oh, well, keep an eye out, Batman. He's coming. He is coming for you. Join him or die. And that's the end of the issue. Yeah, so Geoff Johns writing this. This is basically just set up for a future Justice League arc, it seems like, where we're just setting up all this extra stuff with Brother Eye. I'm interested. I'm intrigued by it. I think Olympian was like the most unnecessary addition to this at all. Like, he didn't even say he joined the Global Guardians. He just was on this team and then bailed. So Blue Beetle's going to be an interesting development. See how they deal with that. And of course, Booster, as far as I can tell, he wasn't wiped from the timeline. Like, he still exists, but he went full on Michael J. Fox and Back to the Future. So I'm interested. I'm very interested to see how this all turns out. Jason Fabok's art is fantastic on every page, as he always is. He is a fantastic artist, and I look forward to seeing him on future Justice League. But as for this issue, I'm going to go ahead and give it I'll give it an 8.5. I think it is a solid wrap-up to Justice League International as a whole. It sets up where each of the different players are and what they're doing. And it while it didn't end in a way that like wraps up the story arc, it set forward new stories that can be told from it. So I'm definitely intrigued to see how this is going to play out in the future, and definitely worth a read if you haven't checked it out. Phantom Lady and Doll Man #1, written by Justin Gray and Jimmy Palmiotti, art by Kat Staggs. This is a new miniseries about the eponymous Phantom Lady and Doll Man, and this issue opens up with years ago, a couple are being tortured and then burnt alive by some mobster guy who apparently the husband of the couple wrote a scathing story about him, exposing his secrets or whatever. But the mobster got to him beforehand and killed him. But we see that their young daughter was watching all this happen, and she made it out alive. Cut to today in Suicide Slum Metropolis. There's some group of drug dealers or something like that making a deal, and they've got a briefcase full of cash, and the narration is from Phantom Lady, obviously, and just goes over her power set, that she's able to use technology to manipulate shadows and light in order to grab people without them even knowing. Like, she can create black fog, she can move through the shadows, she can do whatever. So she's doing that, and she's picking off these gangsters one by one until finally she gets to the last one, and he's like, oh, please let me go, oh, don't hurt me. And she can also drag them into like the shadow realm, pretty much, where there's just a void of nothing. I don't know if she just lets them die in there or eventually lets them out, but she drags them in there. But anyway, she gets her hands on the last guy, and she takes the money and lets him go talk to his boss. Says that let him know that the money's being used for a good cause. So I'm going to cut back 6 months earlier, where we get a breakdown that there's this crime family called, I believe, the Bender family. And Robert Bender was the guy who murdered her parents years ago, because of course that was her. And he's from like a family of serial killers or something, and they basically run all the crime in the city. But recently Robert Bender was killed, seemingly by his own son, I think Cyrus, maybe Eli, I don't know. It's two brothers. And they have some muscle as well, named Frank the Warlock McGraw. So anyway, we're at this club, and they're keeping an eye on who will become Phantom Lady. I don't think she is yet, and her friend. And they are cozying up to him, and he's like, oh, hey, how's it going, babe? Hey, why don't we step outside for a little bit? Both the girls go outside, down to the parking garage, and Jennifer is Phantom Lady's real name. Her friend is basically taken hostage, and Jennifer's forced to watch as they just start like bashing her head against a car and like breaking her nose. And this is all just a message from Cyrus to say, hey, I know that you're writing about me. I know you're following in your father's footsteps, and you were just pretending to date me in order to like do this, but you know, I kind of like having you around. You're a good piece of arm candy. So let this be a warning to you. You're going to stay in line, and you're not going to write about me anymore. And he's like, okay, I understand, sorry. So her friend Ginger disappears after that. Meanwhile, Jennifer makes her way to a junkyard where her friend Dane Maxwell lives. And he is apparently some sort of scientist, and he's studying shrinking technology, and he feels like he's very close to a breakthrough. But Jennifer comes in and is just like, hey, I need you to hack this phone. I stole it off of Cyrus, and I need you to get whatever you can. And for some reason, Dane just, like, immediately snaps at her. Just like, I'm not you. You think I'm just going to do whatever because I'm in love with you, and yes, I am in love with you, but that doesn't mean you can treat me so poorly. And she's like, but you love me? And he's like, yeah, all right, I guess I do. Give me the phone. So I don't, like, it's a very dysfunctional relationship right off the bat. But anyway, some time passes. She apparently fell asleep, and when she wakes up, Dane came in and says, hey, so I cracked the phone. There were a bunch of videos and stuff on it. You can't have it. And she's like, what? What do you mean I can't have it? And he's like, it's too dangerous for you. I left a voicemail with Cyrus telling him that he could have his phone back, but I made copies of it, so he better leave you alone. And she's like, you idiot, you absolute moron. They probably traced your call. And lo and behold, they did. They show up at Dane's garage. They immediately shoot Jennifer in the leg, and Dane goes and hides inside of this, I guess, experiment room is the best I could describe it, and closes the door behind him, which is bulletproof. And they're like, oh, well, guess we'll just have to start pressing switches on this circuit board until we see one that fries you. So they start pressing whatever, and suddenly it lights up all of a sudden. And when they look back inside, Dane has seemingly completely disintegrated. All that's left are his clothes. And Jennifer is distraught. She's like, oh, you didn't have to kill him. You didn't do anything to you. And just like, Cyrus is just like, don't worry about it. Hey, I'll see you again soon. We're going out for dinner later, so be ready for that. So then we cut back over to Dane's clothes, which are inside the room, and lo and behold, crawling out of them is now a 6-inch tall Dane, who just goes, that's great. This is just perfect. And that's where we leave off. So not a whole lot in this issue. It's pretty much just set up right now. I mean, it's only a 4-issue mini, so they're not going to have a lot of time to work with, but I don't think I even know Jennifer's last name. It just seems really surface level right now. It just seems really like, okay, we have to set up not only two characters with completely disparate power sets, we also have to set up our villain right now. We have to know everything that's going on. And it's so surface level that I really, like, whatever. Sure, that jump to the future, or I guess this is 6 months prior, so the jump to current day, showing like, oh, look, she has these powers or whatever. That's cool and all, but she doesn't have them in the story that I believe we'll be following narratively. Like, the setup, she doesn't have them. And all we've gotten so far is the villain and a guy has been shrunken. So there's not a lot here. That's not to say it's bad, but there's not a lot here. So overall, I would say this is probably closer to like a 6. Like, it's good, it's okay, but it's not great yet. And art-wise, I would say it's pretty good, but like, there are several panels in here that, like, I don't know. Is Dane supposed to be bipolar? Is he supposed to be? Because he literally just flips. Like, on one page, he's just like, oh, hey, you want some pancakes? And then the very next panel, he's screaming. And he looks so fierce in the panel. I don't know what to make of this yet. So I'm just going to give it a 6 and see what comes up next time. National Comics Looker, #1, written by Ian Egrington and art by Mike S. Miller. This is about a model turned vampire, and it's just a one-shot. So we open up on the night that our main character, Emily Briggs, was turned by a vampire. We see her being fed upon, and the vampire's not one of like the Twilight or like True Blood sort of vampires. Like, it's like half bat, and it looks grotesque. And we see him feeding on her, and he accidentally cuts himself at some point, and a drop of his blood gets into her mouth, which, once the body is disposed of in a dump, we all of a sudden see her wake up and outstretch her arm. She has now become an immortal vampire. But she was a runway model, which, of course, because of vampire rules, apparently she doesn't show up on film, and also she can't do, like, any sort of swimsuit stuff. So she basically had to retire from modeling, and now she's the manager of her own modeling agency. And she is currently at a runway show where she's just looking out at everybody and basically just criticizing all the rich and famous people up front. It's just like, oh, she's cheating on him and he doesn't want to be with her anymore and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, she gets a call from backstage, and it turns out that two of the people who were supposed to be walking tonight just suddenly disappeared. One of them was a longtime, like, famous model who had semi-retired due to a drug problem, and one was a fresh face where this was going to be her big break. And that's the one that kind of pisses off Emily, because she thinks that she got dragged into the world of drugs by the older one, and I can't remember her name. It was Siren was the older one, and the younger one was Esther. Don't blame me for not remembering Esther. Anyway, they come across this weird little powder thing. They think it's cocaine. It is cocaine, but it's mixed with something else. And once Looker tastes it, she finds out that it's blood. And the blood has memories, I guess. And we see a shot of a dozen plus different women who were all killed. And it's too much for Looker. She ends up passing out. When she comes to, she's in her bedroom being taken care of by her two close friends, who are Charles and I'm blanking on the other one's name. They don't do a good job of repeating names in this issue, I will say that. Roma is the other one. And they are two people who are aware of her secret. They get into that later. But they basically brought her here and said, yeah, okay, so what happened? And Looker explained what she saw. And then Roma reveals that Siren's body had turned up. She was killed. So somebody had actually murdered her, and Esther might be next. So this really pisses off Looker that, again, she got brought into this drug world. It's like, we're her employers. We're not supposed to be acting as her parents. What? God, these people need to step up or whatever. To which Charles and Roma are like, well, we're your employees, so I guess we'll just leave. Bye. And she's like, oh, I was kind of a bitch. And then we see that in her previous life, before being a vampire, she was also a bitch. She doesn't actually show anything she did. She just says that it wasn't enough for her to succeed. Everyone else had to fail. So there's that going on. But then once she became a vampire, she met up with Roma because Roma was brought in from overseas, and she was forced to work in a brothel despite the fact she was going to be modeling. And so she took the guy who was basically human trafficking her and killed her. Roma saw everything, so had to hire her on as a personal assistant. And then Charles ended up catching a photographer selling drugs, and the photographer didn't want to get caught, started beating up Charles. And then, once again, Emily jumped in and saved Charles' life. So now they're two people that she can trust. But anyway, she's going out to get some information that night. And she goes into a blind sculptor friend of hers named Paul. And I guess Paul doesn't know her secret, yet somehow she justifies coming in through the window every night. So, whatever. Anyway, they talk about how there's a girl missing, and he used to work with the police, so he's going to put out some feelers for her. And they share a moment and a kiss, which I guess is the first time that they kissed. And Emily's like, I shouldn't have done that. I'm sorry. We can never be together. Goodbye. And she just, leaves. And without Paul even doing anything, she just immediately thinks, okay, well, who is someone that I think would supply drugs to Siren? And she goes to a guy named Perfect George, who I guess does a whole lot of cosmetic surgery. And she busts into his place, but it turns out he's already been attacked. He's on the verge of death, and he's like, George, who did this? Who did this to you? He's like, oh, it was Simon. And then immediately Looker knows where to go next. It's a guy named Simon Glass, who apparently was on her list of people who clearly are bad, so she just goes to his place, breaks in, and sees that he has a whole lot of antique stuff and artwork or whatever. And she goes into his living room and finds Esther passed out on the bed, but she isn't actually passed out. She is awake, but paralyzed and unable to respond to anything. So Looker confronts Simon Glass, and it turns out Simon is also from the weird part of town because he is an incubus. I don't know what that entails, but his face opens up like the Predator, and is trying to feed on her because he enjoys feeding on beautiful things. So he's got like an alien second mouth inside of his first one, and it's like suctions out, starts sucking her blood. She knees him in the crotch and headbutts him, and then immediately goes for like the jugular. And he's like, "Oh, you're so new at this, you don't even know how to fight." And he's like, "Yeah, maybe I am new, but I know how to kill you." So she takes her hand and shoves it through his chest and like just tears out his heart. And in his dying words, Simon says like, "I know who turned you, bleh." And he like disintegrates down. And of course at that point Esther comes to, and she's like, "What is that? Did you just save me? What's going on?" He's like, "No, you've been drugged. This is all a hallucination." Ooh. And she walks Esther out back to safety. So then we get the epilogue. It turns out that afterwards, Looker went back, set fire to the place. Esther told the police about Simon, so they figured it was just a suicide where he burned himself rather than be caught alive. And everyone's like, okay, well, maybe as a boss, I should not be as much of a dick. And they're like, that's a good character development for one issue. Congratulations. And here's your reward. And they hand her an envelope, which came from Paul. And it's a key to his place because they joked about not having to let her come in through the window every time. I forgot to mention that. So yeah, that's the issue. I mean, it's a solid enough single story. I don't know how much there is in terms of long-term storytelling, but there doesn't have to be. It's not really setting up for a series. It's just, okay, here's my thing for this vampire model, and then we're just done with it. It's weird to me how there are so many vampire things that are like, we only go for people who deserve it, like the bad people of society. Like, I get from an anti-hero sort of has to be at least morally gray perspective. You can't just go after whoever. But it's weird to me that this happens so frequently. So yeah, this one was fine. Art-wise, I think it was good. I'm not a huge fan of the coloring, but pencil-wise and inking-wise, it's fine. And the coloring does fit. It's just not a style that I'm fond of. So overall, I'd say this one gets a 6.5. It's good, not great. It's just a decent entry into what I guess could be part of the larger universe, though it does seem very separate. And that's it. That's all the comics that came out from DC Comics this August 29th, 2012. But of course, we are not done yet because I have yet to do a whole bunch of backups. So normally I would go through and give a little bit of detail on each and every single one, let you know what you're in for, but there are a lot. Anybody watching the video version, you can just look off to the side here and see there is a lot. So I'm just going to give you a brief little breakdown of each one here. We have 2 Action Comics stories focusing on that period where Clark Kent was dead. We have 2 All-Star Western stories, one featuring a character called Batlash, the other featuring a character called Terrence 13. We have the concluding chapters of Batman's Fall of the House of Wayne, which we started last time we had a 5th week. We have the concluding chapters of the Two-Face story that we started the last time there was a 5th week, as well as a Detective Comics story about Joker's cut-off face. We have more issues of The Unknown Soldier, which is the second half of GI Combat. We have chapters 4 and 5 of Shazam, which is the backup to Justice League. We have a 2-part story of Essence from Red Hood and the Outlaws. And we have the epilogue to a story that was first started in DC Universe Presents and is being wrapped up here in Teen Titans. So, yeah, a lot. Let's go ahead and jump into it. None of those were in the correct order. I don't even know where we're going to begin. So let's just see what happens next, shall we? The Fall of the House of Wayne, Parts 2 and 3. This is the backup story from Batman 10 and 11. Part 1 we covered on our last 5th week, and in it, Martha Wayne had grown tired of the mayor's horrible policies and decided to do something about it, and Jarvis Pennyworth, Alfred's father, was there at the home to help her. And in some period of time afterwards, we see that he is being hunted down by one of the Court of Owl's Talons. So this picks up with him trying to run into a nearby shed in order to hide from the Talon. And while he does end up making it, he is impaled by some of the Talon's throwing knives through the door. And then we see in the past that, and by the way, when I say in the past, this is a difference seemingly of about like a few weeks to months, so not a whole lot of time has passed. Martha had become pregnant with the second Wayne child, and she is also pushing to create a new school for the underprivileged to learn at. But as she's doing so, she's being threatened repeatedly by phone calls that are basically telling her, like, hey, stop what you're doing or you will be killed, or even worse will happen to your family. Back in modern day, the Talon kicks his way into the shed and starts skulking around as Jarvis has hidden up in the rafters, trying to escape from it. Then back in the past, Jarvis gets a call on the phone again, telling him, oh, hey, you're just the person we wanted to reach. Next time you need to drive Mrs. Wayne somewhere, take her to the docks so that we can have a nice little friendly conversation with her. And Jarvis freaks out on this guy, like, what? Who is this? Who's calling? And as he's doing so, an owl bashes into the window he's sitting next to, enough to make him jump. He reports this call to Martha. Martha's like, okay, so we just won't go near the docks, no big deal. And Jarvis is like, maybe, like, we should just take a step back because, like, you have an unborn child and, like, you got Bruce here. Maybe we should just worry about that. And she's like, no, I'm not going to back down just because somebody is threatening me. That's not how this is going to work out. So they both hop into the car in order to go down to the school site that they're planning on opening up. And on their trip there, they reach the intersection of Lincoln and March. And as they reach it, the Talon sets down some explosives that flips the car into a fiery crash. And Jarvis goes into great detail of how he remembers the screaming of Martha and Bruce and the blood and the fire and everything like that. But the end result is that Martha ends up losing her child, and in her grief, she does end up having to stop working on this school. She isn't able to continue. So her and Thomas, they plant a willow tree out in the backyard, trying to hope that it'll, bring some sort of closure, saying that this belonged to their unborn child and it'll allow the child to watch over them as it grows. But they decide, all right, look, we just need to get out for a while. So they pack all their bags. Bruce, Thomas, and Martha make their way out of the town. And that night, Jarvis gets another call from the mysterious voice, and he says he should have just brought him to the docks. It would have been a hell of a lot less painful than everything we just did. And now, because you didn't listen to us, you're on our list. So you better watch your back tonight. And this is when it's all caught up. It's now the exact same time on either side of things. He goes and he starts writing this letter to Alfred, as this entire narration has just been Jarvis warning Alfred, like, don't come here. Do not come to Gotham. Even if I die and it's your turn to take over the Pennyworth name here as the butler, don't. Just do not. Gotham is cursed. This place is awful. So I hope that you find this letter well and you don't come here. And we see in modern day that the Talon has set fire to the shed, forcing Alfred to get out of the rafters right in front of the Talon, and the Talon just throws him down and seemingly goes to kill him. So then we cut back to modern day, like actual nowadays, and Alfred is at his father's grave paying some respects, and he's like, Bruce is there as well. Master Wayne, I never even really knew my father. I lived overseas the entire time he was serving here, and we talked briefly, but I didn't really know anything about him. But you found that name Pennyworth down in the labyrinth of the owls back when you were down there, and makes me wonder about his cause of death. And Bruce is like, we can dig him up, we can find out, we can get the truth. And he's like, no, I feel like I know everything I need to know about my father, and if anything did happen in regards to the Court of Owls doing something to my father, what you've done to them over the course of the last arc is more than enough payback. So thank you, Master Wayne, but I really don't need to know. We should leave the past undisturbed. And as they're walking away from the graves, and a giant willow tree that's grown, an owl is perched on the branch watching them. And that's where we leave off. It was solid. It was good. I do wish that just in the way I was formatting this show, I did all of them at once. I think it would be a more straightforward story. But it revealed a lot of the behind the scenes stuff that didn't really need to be said, if that makes any sense. Of, oh well, the intersection of Lincoln Street and March Street, like that's where it happened, and then Lincoln March is the guy who was like the name of supposedly Thomas Wayne Jr. Like, it was some cool, interesting little extra bits that didn't need to be there, but it's cool that they were. And I think that's a perfect use for these sort of backup stories. And of course, they set fire to the place back in the past, and Alfred never ended up getting the letter. He didn't know how his father died. He didn't know. He never heard any of this. So a little bittersweet in that regard. Rafael Albuquerque did the art on this. It is fantastic looking. Very much fits the sort of style that they're going for. It's a darker, scratchier, more horror sort of atmosphere. It's fantastic in that regard. I really can't complain on that. So overall, I would say this is probably, as a whole, probably like a 7 to 7.5. And I'll give it the 7.5. I do think it deserves it. So that is the Fall of the House of Wayne. And I look forward to seeing how Batman continues, if they will keep doing any more backup stories. Big Fall / Squared Up. These are the backup stories featuring Two-Face in Detective Comics, issues 10 and 11. The story that we had last fifth week was he was hired to get rid of a guy who was blackmailing a prosecutor, and in doing so, the prosecutor would drop all the charges against Harvey Dent. And in the chase that followed, he got attacked by ninjas. Two-Face was attacked by ninjas, and then we pick up where we are. So he's in the custody of these ninjas, who I guess are actually more of like monks or whatever, but there's a main one called the leader, and the leader's like, hey, here's the thing. I can be your savior or your executioner. It all depends on whether or not you're good or bad. So I'm gonna look inside your mind with some weirdo magic stuff, and I'm gonna see whether you've got darkness or light. And he looks inside, and he's blinded by the light within Two-Face. So for some period of time, Two-Face doesn't know, either 3 days or 3 weeks. It's 3 days, because they say later it's been only a week since like all this went down. But he's like learning their ways, and he's calming his anger. He's not as upset anymore about everything going down. And over time, he does mellow out. However, after he becomes a little bit closer to the group, leader wakes him up again and says, all right, it's time for me to read your mind again. Now that you're not so adverse to me coming in, maybe now I can see the true you. And he looks into his mind and sees something. He doesn't exactly say, but he says, I'm sorry, I can't help you anymore. You must go your own path. So they have Two-Face leave, and Two-Face goes out to where Dominic Storano and Freak Show, a.k.a. Tommy, are hiding out. And it turns out, as they're talking to themselves, that this was all just a ploy. That they hired the weird ninja monk gang to kill Two-Face and take him off of both of their plates. However, the monk ninja guy had a code of ethics, and he wouldn't kill anybody who was not 100% infested with darkness. And since Two-Face is, 50-50, he still had some light in him. So at this point, Two-Face busts into where they're hiding out. He's got guns aimed at both of them. And they're just like, okay, let's just talk this out. And Freak Show, he's this guy, big guy, a whole lot of physical issues, sitting in a wheelchair. He presses some button on the wheelchairs, and a whole bunch of guns pop out and start firing at Two-Face. He manages to dodge all the shots, get some shots off on Freak Show, and then has Storano in his sights. And before Storano can do pretty much anything, Two-Face just unloads on him. He goes over to Freak Show, who is still breathing, and he kicks Freak Show in the face, and then it looks like Freak Show was like, the best way I can describe it is like a puddle of Clayface goo, but that might just be a stylistic artistic thing. I genuinely can't tell. So anyway, he did end up taking a few shots from Storano and Freak Show during all that. So we pick back up where we began the first issue of him stumbling down an alley. He stumbles back to Leader, and he says like, hey, I need your help. I know you kicked me out, but please, I'm dying. So they fix him up, they heal him up. And then Two-Face confronts the leader after he's been healed up and says, like, hey, you were hired to kill me and you didn't. And he's like, yeah, I mean, you still had good news, so that wasn't going to kill you. And he's like, okay, but you sent me back to them and where I would have been killed if I was not properly prepared. Like, you still wanted me dead. And he's just like, no, I didn't want it. Like, you're the one who has to decide whether you, like, walk the path of light or darkness. I'm not the one who does that. You have to tip the scales, especially because you are so perfectly 50-50. So Two-Face flips his coin. He sees it comes up bad, and he shoots the leader. But, like, as he's shooting, he sees that the leader's robes just collapse, and the leader has seemingly disappeared somewhere. And that's it. That's just where it ends, of Two-Face looking on the robes, and he says, sometimes you live, sometimes you die, and sometimes you cheat. So I liked it. It was solid. I mean, considering all 4 parts here, I don't know. It's a weird story for Two-Face. I don't know. I guess that it really was Two-Face because of the balance between light and dark. Like, that's the story that really wanted to be told. But it's weird that it took until part 3 to get there, and it was so, like, throwaway. It was so just like, oh, yeah, and then here's the reason why I didn't kill you, because you're light and dark balanced. Like, okay, I guess. Art's fantastic. I really do want to point that out before I forget. Szymon Kudranski's on the art. Tony S. Daniel wrote it, and it is fantastic. It is really great. But I don't know, just writing-wise, it seemed like a weird little half story that the main focus of was only half of that half story. Like, the thing that seemed like the biggest punch was just, like, scattered into like 3 pages of this and then forgotten about. So I don't know, it's good, it's not great, it's fine. So overall, I'd say the entire story, I'll give it like I'll give it a 6.5. A lot of that's elevated by the art, because Szymon Kudranski does these shadows, these scenes fantastically. It's beautifully done. So 6.5 for this, and we'll see if Two-Face shows up in anything else soon. The Telltale Face, written by James Tynion IV, art by Szymon Kudranski. This is the backup story to Batman number 12. Detective Comics number 12. And it is about Joker's face, which is currently being held in evidence in GCPD. And we see it's one night GCPD, and Sergeant Harvey Bullock is talking to a rookie named Nancy, whose first night there, she's here to watch over the face. She just has to be there and like watch over the evidence room. And he recounts like, yeah, here's the thing. I'm not like superstitious or whatever, but that face is very creepy. And then he tells a story of how he had a young Boy Scout kind of cop who was with him. And whenever the cop got nervous, he always whistled The Farmer in the Dell. And then one night he was in charge of getting the Joker to Arkham Asylum, and he couldn't stop whistling that song. So then months later, Joker gets out, he kidnaps this cop and his family, kills his family, and then tells the cop to whistle the song again. He's crying so much that he literally cannot make the whistling face. So the Joker cuts off one of his fingers, whittles it into a whistle, and then keeps on playing the song over and over until the cop bled out. So and Harvey knows all this because the Joker was bragging about it. Yeah. So anyway, the woman takes the mask, looks at it, and then sits down, starts doing some paperwork. It's 3 a.m. She's on the night shift, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned that. And then all of a sudden she hears a quiet little laugh off to her side. She looks around the room, says like, hello, is anyone there? And then all of a sudden this huge laughter bursts out from the mask. And she looks at it again. She tries to calm her nerves, and she's like, okay, it's nothing. It's just a pile of dead skin. There's nothing else to it. She takes it out of its case and looks at it just to confirm it's just a pile of dead skin. There's nothing special about it. And as she's holding it, it starts laughing again. She immediately throws it, starts cowering. She's like, okay, it's all in your head. It's all in your head. This isn't real. This isn't real. Until she looks up and she sees that when she threw it, it revealed on the back that there was a little speaker that was hooked up to a tape recorder. And all of this was actually just a prank that Harvey Bullock was playing on the rookie. So she storms upstairs, talks to Bullock. punches him in the face and says, I swear to God, when I get back down there, if it laughs one more time, I will be writing you up. And Harvey's like, all right, yeah. Welcome to the Force. You're going to fit in just fine. So then we cut to outside the GCPD, building across from it, on top of the roof. There's a figure standing, looking down at it, and seemingly the Joker, but we don't get to see him, and it says it's time to put on a happy face. So, yeah. I mean, I like it. The fact that it is just a short little thing of like, hey, guys, I just want to remind you that Joker's face is still a thing, because it's probably been a good, I would say at least 8 months since we talked about it. It's been a long time, so good little reminder, nice little short story to deal with it. I like the characterization of both Nancy and Bullock. They both did a fine job. Art, fantastic. Kudranski does nothing wrong when it comes to heavy shadows like this and setting up like a horror atmosphere. So overall, I'd say the story gets a 7. I really do enjoy it. And yeah, we'll see what comes next for the Joker's face. Essence, written by Scott Lobdell, art by Ario and Anindito. This is the backup story to Red Hood and the Outlaws 10 and 11. I call it Essence. It actually has 2 different titles for each chapter, but they're all like 14 words long because that's how Scott Lobdell names things, and I'm not going to bother with that. But anyway, we follow the character Essence in a short little story here. So we open up on a group of escaped prisoners led by, he doesn't get a name, but I'm going to call him the big guy. And they were looking for an item called the Life Hammer. And this big guy's like, it's been at least a century since I've had it in my hand. Now it will protect me from the remaining members of the Untitled. And everyone else who's with him that he helped break out is like, okay, yeah, sure, whatever. But they've captured a ranger who I guess was keeping a look after this part and holding her at gunpoint, and they're like, okay, should we maybe like tie her up and then go? And he's like, nah, and shoots her in the head. And everyone else is like, oh my God, I can't believe he did that. Jeez, okay, so harsh. So they go to dispose of the body, and they talk about like how he helped break them out of prison, and now he was talking like he's saying humans instead of just, people. It makes it sound like he's not even a person to begin with, but he's definitely not someone to be trifled with as they drive away, leaving this body in the dust. So then the body starts turning, and we get Essence's narration saying that, she's drawn to the acts of evil that the Untitled commit, and so she's able to, I guess, turn or possess this body and become Essence in order to exact revenge upon the Untitled, of which she is one of them. I want to make that clear. She is also part of the Untitled, but she's the good one, I guess. So they're driving away on a motorcycle, following after a car that contains the other 2. And the 2 on the motorcycle are like, man, maybe he's like one of those demonites or whatever. And then I roll my eyes at that part. But as they're driving, they enter into this black fog, and Essence is there. And she literally just turns them into bones. She's like, yeah, I'm just going to kill you because you've committed acts of evil, even if it wasn't technically your fault. That's just how I roll. And she takes a second to apologize to their bones because it wasn't their fault they ran into an Untitled, but regardless, they had to die. And then we get the big guy holding this gauntlet that he calls the Life Hammer. And he's like, this Life Hammer's enough to destroy you, Essence. And Essence is like, oh my, it very well might. So he uses it on her. She takes the blast full force, and it seemingly like disintegrates her, or at least knocks her out or whatever. And he explains like, this was created by the All Cast in order to kill the Untitled, but now I use it to kill one of the All Cast. Isn't that ironic? And then like the third guy, the last guy, he's like, excuse me, sir. Hi, I was just a bonds bailman that broke out of jail. Clearly this is some sort of meta turf war thing. Can I go home now? And he's like, yeah, sure, of course. Blah, and hits him with the Life Hammer. So then Essence comes back and is just like, this is why you must be stopped. You're so evil. And he's like, how did you survive the Life Hammer? And she's like, it was easy. As soon as it touched you, it became corrupted and unusable. It was nothing but a light show. And I am still just as powerful. I am Essence. I am life. And she does some sort of thing where she like corrupts his body and he just disintegrates into nothing. So then she goes and to the life hammer, and she's like, "Oh, how I long for the all cast and my mother Dukra who created it," but it falls to dust in her hands. And at that point, a bunch of other like black market dealers apparently show up, and so she just poofs out of there. And yeah, that's pretty much the story. We do get one last page here of her taking the killed ranger. Her name was Migdalia Alvarez, and delivering her body to the ranger station where her husband also works, that she married just over 6 months ago. So we get one moment of him holding her body and crying as Essence poofs away in smoke. That's that. I mean, if you're going to try to make Essence an interesting character, this is a fine enough way to do it. Of her, like, oh, here's, we're off doing space things with Starfire and Red Hood right now, even after we just specifically said that we're going to focus on getting rid of the Untitled. So I feel like this was kind of a thing of like, no, we're keeping our promise. It's just in a backup story where it's kind of not going to matter. But it was at least something. I'm not opposed to the story. That being said, Essence is so bland of a character right now. It's just like, oh, I kill people, but I'm also on the side of good, but I also am evil just by my birthright. Nature, who knows? So, yeah, I got to give that one, I'll give it it's between 5.5 and 6, and I'm going to come down on 6. And honestly, it's just because it's inoffensive, and it does have a couple, like, I like that last page of the ranger being redelivered to the ranger station. Like, that was a nice sweet moment. It has the occasional little thing, but I just don't care about Essence enough to like really put a lot of effort into it. And there's nothing in here that makes me care about Essence either. So 6 out of 10. We'll see if Essence does anything ever again. Absent Friends, written by Sholly, Fisch, art by Cafu. This is the backup story to Action Comics number 10, and it is set during the period that Clark Kent, as the secret identity, has been killed. And we open up with a flashback to Jimmy Olsen and Clark Kent just walking the streets of Metropolis during a blizzard because Jimmy really wants to go see this weird monster movie that's showing for one night only. And Clark ends up tripping on some ice, and they wipe out on the sidewalk, and Clark's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, Jimmy." And Jimmy sees this van careening out of control that crashes right where they would have been in the crosswalk if they had continued walking. And the guy inside's all right, but Jimmy, he's recounting this story in modern day saying, yeah, that's classic Clark, man. He was constantly getting into accidents that ended up saving, like, both of our lives. It's genuinely, he's probably the luckiest man alive right up until the, he's dead part. So we then see Perry White. He's sitting there, and it's a whole collection of people who worked at, like, the Daily Planet and worked at the Star where Clark was working, who all knew Clark and were very sad to hear about him passing. And Lois steps up and she tells her story of thinking that Clark was just kind of, a whatever. He was just going to be writing puff pieces or whatever. But he ended up writing the expose that took down Glenn Morgan. And the one story that she really wanted to share was she was having lunch with Clark one day, just talking about whatever, can't even remember. But then a gas main exploded right out on the street out in front of them. It was enough to shake the entire sitting block. And when they went outside, Lois's first thoughts immediately went to journalism of like, oh, who did this? What could possibly be going on? What caused it? Whereas Clark, he immediately found somebody who was hurt and just went to go care for them. His first instinct was to help people. And Lois followed suit. She immediately went to help people as much as possible. And yes, they both got their front pages that day, but they made sure everyone was okay first. So Clark helped make Lois a better person as well. And Clark's editor stands up, and he is saying, like, thank you, Lois. I knew Clark ever since he was a little boy. I saw him when he was covering stories at the Smallville Sentinel. Like, we got to know each other. He was a good employee, but even better, he was a better friend, and he was just a good person overall. So he was a man who cared about life, and he cared about people. He raised up the people who deserved it and took down the ones who didn't. He's a good person. So he raises his glass and he says, to absent friends, and everyone joins him in the cheer. So then later on, after dinner and drinks, everyone's making their way out of the tavern. And Jimmy and Lois are talking, and they're like, I think Clark would have been happy with that, but he would have been surprised because he's such a humble guy that he probably wouldn't think he deserves all that praise. But wherever he is, I'm sure he would have wanted to be there right then. And we see Superman on top of the building across the street, looking down on them, hearing this conversation, and seemingly regretting that he gave up the secret identity. So, it's a solid story. Unfortunately, I do read these after I have read the follow-up issues where Clark Kent comes back to life, so it kind of loses a bit of a punch there. But it was a solid story. If I read that at the time, I think that would have been a nice little send-off to say, like, no, Clark Kent is actually dead. It is something that has actually hit these people and impacted their lives in a certain way. So, yeah, it's a nice, solid story. The art, Cafu does a great job throughout, does a good job of, even in just showing the memories, it has just a different tone to it. And that's probably down to coloring more than it is pencils, but it just has a different tone to it that makes you feel like, yeah, okay, I can easily tell this is them telling the story, and then this is the story themselves. So art's fantastic. And the writing, it really does just puff up that, Clark, not Superman, but Clark was a good person. And he did the right thing always. So, yeah, I really do enjoy this story. I'll give it an 8, honestly. I think if you were to see just one little thing of like, okay, but why is Clark Kent important compared to Superman? It's these moments right here where Clark is able to do the smaller things that Superman may not be able to. He's able to reach out and do those things for people who may not be able to get their help themselves. So, yeah, 8 for this. Looking forward to more. Clothes Encounter, written by Sholly, Fisch, art by Cafu. This is the backup story to Action Comics number 11, and it details a t-shirt shop owner. So we've got two friends, one who lives in Metropolis and one who's just visiting. The one who's visiting really wants to go get a Superman t-shirt. So we go down to this t-shirt shop owner, and they say like, oh, how much are the shirts? And the guy says $25 a pop. And he's like, that's ridiculous. It's a t-shirt. And he's like, but here's the thing. This shop is the one that Superman himself bought his t-shirts at when he was still wearing the t-shirts. And the guy's like, okay, but you're like almost certainly lying. And he's like, no, swear to God, here's the story. And he recounts the story of how a guy came in one day holding like the Superman logo on a piece of paper. And he's like, hey, could I get this printed on a shirt? Blue shirts with the insignia on them. And he's like, oh yeah, sure. Is this for like a softball team or something like that? He's like, yeah, something like that. So he's placing the order, and he's like, if you want 50 shirts, because that's how much the order was placed for, I only have 30 blues, so how about we also get some red and white ones in there as well? To which he's like, yeah, red, white, and blue. That sounds like it could work. Which answers a question I had back when he showed up with a red shirt on. So I feel like you're retconning, but I'll take it. Anyway, while they're placing this order, a guy comes in with a gun, points it at the shop owner, and is like, all right, give me the money. He's like, dude, I run a t-shirt shop. I'm not a bank. I don't have that much money. He's like, shut up and give me the money. Superman steps in, and he's like, hey, nobody else get hurt, and he tries going for the gun, to which the guy shoots, like, point blank at Superman. And the t-shirt shop owner recounts, like, at first I thought he missed, mainly because I didn't know about the bulletproof thing yet. But then Superman just one-handed pushes the guy, grabs the gun, and the guy goes flying across the room, knocked out cold. And the owner is super impressed with it. He's like, that was amazing. What can I ever do to thank you? And he's like, no, don't worry about it. Just pay it forward. And he's like, right. Yeah, you know what? I'll pay it forward now. I'm going to give you these shirts 20% off. So, yeah, that's him recounting the story. And he's like, yep, this is the original design straight from Superman. And the dude who came from out of town's like, oh my God, I need this shirt. I have to get one. I would love one. And then the buddy's like, the one who lives in town's like, yeah, you know what? We're going to think on it. We'll be back later. And he ushers the guy out the door. And the guy from out of town's like, what? Dude, I didn't get the shirt. Why are we leaving? He's like, hey, I'm not saying I don't believe his story, but it's $25. You are screaming out of towner. And we see a shot of all the shops down the street, and every t-shirt shop is claiming the exact same thing. So, womp, womp, womp. That's the story of that. Do I believe it? Probably. Makes sense, but at the same point, Who knows? Could be a fake story. It's just fun. It's just a fun little thing where they're like, people have probably been poking fun at the Superman t-shirt. Like, how did he even end up getting those shirts in the first place? And so Shally Fisch just came out and said, here's how. This is how it happened. That's how it was. So, I don't know. It just seems like a fun little story. Don't need to think too hard on it. That being said, because it's just a fun little story, it's not, blowing my hair back. It's nothing amazing. So all in all, I'm just going to give this one a 7. It's competently done. It's funny in the moments it needs to be. It answers a few questions that I had, but it's not anything super amazing. So 7 for this. Cafu's great on art as well, as he always has been. And it's a one and done. I genuinely can't look forward to anything from here. It's just done. Shazam! Parts 4 and 5, written by Geoff Johns, art by Gary Frank. This is the backup story to Justice League 10 and 11. And where we last left off, we had Dr. Sivana being blasted with electricity that allows him to now see magic. And Billy just got into a fight with the bully's father from his school. So we cut back in with Billy's foster parents, who are basically just sitting down talking like, it sucks that Billy went through that, and we should definitely do something about it. But at the same time, like, Billy is a lot more angry than he led us on to be. Like, he has a lot of underlying issues. And yeah, that's to be expected. Like, the foster system's not exactly kind, but he's not even giving them a chance. So we then see Billy packing up his bag and seemingly sneaking out in the middle of the night. And Freddy sees him leave, goes for his crutches, and notices Pickles sitting on the ground. And as Billy's making his way down the snowy streets of Philadelphia, Freddy's following behind him one step at a time until Billy crawls underneath a bush and doesn't come back out. Freddy goes over and sees that there is a hole in the wall behind the bush that they both crawl through. And we see that it lets out into the tiger exhibit of the Philadelphia Zoo. And Billy is just there talking to Tawny the tiger, who is basically his oldest memory, even older than his mom and his dad. It's the closest thing to family that Billy has. And he tries feeding Tawny a hamburger that he snuck out from home, even took the pickles off it, like Tawny likes. And then Tawny starts reacting to something behind Billy. Billy's about to throw a punch, but we see that's Freddy, who falls backwards on his ass. And Freddy just is like, why are you here? Like, what's going on, man? I thought you were, like, sneaking out to, like, leave forever. But no, you're just coming here to feed a tiger. By the way, I took your wallet. I saw there was a picture of the tiger in there, like, along with a membership card for a Family Finders website. So, yeah, I do know a little bit about you. And he goes over his own thing of how his parents are locked up and have never even bothered trying to contact him. So, the foster parents are actually pretty good people. It might be worth giving them a chance. But at this point, Billy's like, look, even if they were Superman and Wonder Woman, like, it doesn't matter. They're not my real parents. Now, please just go. And as Freddy's leaving, he's like, oh, by the way, it was really cool how you stood up for us and, like, threw a punch. And hopefully that'll get them off of our backs for a while. Billy's like, what do you mean a while? And he's like, oh, well, they attack us literally every day. Like, it's a constant issue. And he's like, oh, well, maybe we can get back at them somehow. And Freddy thinks for a second. He's like, well, I do know where they live. So cut over to Dr. Sivana, who's down in this ancient burial place, and he's looking at this supposedly blank wall. Nobody sees anything except for him. He sees all this writing and inscriptions and stuff like that. And everyone's like, dude, there's literally a treasure room, like, right over there. And Sivana's like, no, that's bait. This is where the real treasure is, and I can see how to open it. It says inside lies Black Adam, who cannot be released until someone can destroy him, and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I can open it up by saying Shazam, and then all of a sudden, lightning strike, there's a giant hole in the wall. His entire crew is, like, crushed by falling rocks, except for one guy. And out steps Black Adam, who has only one thing to say: where is the wizard? One of the other crew members tries to escape. Black Adam just throws a giant boulder through him. Then he picks up Sivana and the one remaining crew member and flies up out of the tomb. Once again asking, where's the wizard? The one guy, he can't understand Black Adam because he's speaking in an ancient tongue. Sivana can. So Black Adam looks at the other guy and just incinerates him with lightning, drops him to the ground. And then Savannah says, like, all right, so who are you? And Black Adam says, who are you? And Savannah says, I'm the guy who can help you find the wizard. So then we cut back over to Billy and Freddy. They've snuck up to the house of the bullies, and they're going to take one of their cars, put it in neutral, and then shove it down a hill. But as they're trying to break into the car, the alarm goes off, and the lights come on, and immediately they have to run to get out of there. Freddy, of course, can't run very fast, so Billy just throws him into some nearby bushes and says, you stay here, I can outrun him. So he acts as bait. He says, like, catch me if you can, suckers. And they start running down the streets of Philadelphia, causing a lot of, like, general mayhem on the whole way down, until Billy ends up making his way into the subway. He thinks he's gotten away, but he gets punched in the face one last time before the doors finally close and the bullies are on the other side. So as he's on this subway, he gets back up, and all of a sudden the magic starts crackling around him. And when it stops, he looks around him, and the subway is completely changed. It's in a completely different style. And he steps out to this fog-filled room, and once the fog clears, he sees essentially a castle with the logo of Shazam / Black Lightning on there. And he just says, holy crap. And that's where it leaves off for now. Yeah, I mean, it's still setting up the plot, probably. The art, I always have to say, Gary Frank doing the art on this, fantastic. It looks beautiful in every single part of the way. I like the little brief characterization for Freddy and Billy, just talking about, like, their previous parents, the things they remember, stuff like that. Black Adam had a very menacing intro, like, just randomly crushing and electrocuting bodies as he saw fit. It works on every level. So overall, I'm going to go ahead and give this one... I mean, I'm more or less working for the entire arc, but if I'm just focusing on these two issues, I would say they are like an 8. Like, it gives a bit more characterization and it introduces Black Adam as the villain. So it's very good, but it's also not doing anything super amazing yet. I'm sure that we will get there very shortly, because the next issue of this is actually Justice League number 0. It's the entirety of the 0 issue is dedicated to Shazam. So part 6 will be in that, and then backup stories will continue from there. So 8 for this. Looking forward to the next one. The Unknown Soldier, parts 2 through 4, written by Justin Gray and Jimmy Palmiotti, art by Dan Panosian. Part 1, we discovered the Unknown Soldier, who was a guy who lost his family in a terrorist attack, and now he's just on a quest for vengeance throughout the entire U.S. military. This issue picks up with him really getting into it, and they apparently put him under, them being the military, put under the Unknown Soldier and soup him up with some super special extra stuff, so he's able to move faster, think smarter, do whatever else. While he's under, they specifically say that he opted not to have facial reconstruction. He's always going to have those bandages on, but he's going to be able to wear like a sort of smart skin mask in order to shield his identity. He has a nightmare about his family dying in an inferno while he's asleep, and then when he wakes up, he immediately starts wrecking the place in a PTSD rage. And he hasn't stopped until Agent Kamal Akbari shows up, and she is the handler for the Unknown Soldier and clears him for action. So his first little test run is in Mexico City. He's down there to stop the drug trade and get into the network of tunnels that are underneath the city that they use to ferret the drugs around. So he comes across some cartel members and just brutalizes them with a machete and utterly like decapitates some of them. He finds out where they were guarding and blocking. He goes inside and just starts killing every one of the members inside. And then there's all of a sudden a shift that I believe is just him going higher up the chain because he's still dressed in the same clothing. But somehow he makes it to this room that has an FBI agent dead on the table, and it's going to be sent as a message from all the different drug lords across like all these different countries. And he just walks in, he doesn't walk in the room, he pushes a grocery cart into the room full of explosives and just sets it off. And then they just don't ever talk about that part again. So then we get into the second plot where there is this new terrorist showing up named Zari, who they thought that he was part of an organization called Crimson Jihad. However, it turns out that Crimson Jihad is actually a virus that was made and is going to be spread across the entire Afghani region. And Unknown Soldier's like, okay, why am I here? I can't fight a virus. It turns out they snuck it into his drink to see how he would react to it, and he's actually able to resist the virus because of all of his physical upgrades. So they know where Zari is, they know he's in a compound, and there's literally well, hold on, I'm skipping ahead. They show that Zari is planning something with another terrorist group to plant a bunch of different American children who were kidnapped in their youth and brainwashed into this terrorist network so that they can get past all the racial profiling of the American government and then plant the Crimson Jihadi in America. So that's going on. So then we get a one-page thing of apparently they implanted memories into the Unknown Soldier's mind of him having a friend who was a Muslim who was bullied, therefore allowing him to have some level of compassion and also not be totally just seeing any sort of Muslim as the enemy. He actually has some compassion for innocence, and it's just a thing. I mean, I don't know how to better say that. It just says oh yes, we did that. Okay, is that good or bad? So then we get a 4-page walkthrough of how the Unknown Soldier completely decimates this compound that Zari's hidden in and destroys every living person there, except for Zari, who manages to trap himself inside of a bunker, which he walks himself over to, uses a computer to hack open the door, and when he gets inside, he's greeted by an entire army of extremists, all defending Zari. So at that point, the people watching him are like, he's screwed. All right, we put a nuke in his chest. Let's set it off. And at that point, Komar's handler's like, hold on. Let's see what he does. And he just goes full on John Wick, just killing every single last one of them. He gets up to Zari. Zari's about to blow his brains out with a gun so that he can't be tortured for info. But Unknown Soldier shoots his hand off and says all right, I got you. What do you have to say? And it's just you're too late. We've already launched our plan and thousands will die in America. Well, ha ha ha. As we see that these children, these American kids that were brainwashed are making their way across the border up to New York City. So they do a mind dump of Zari and manage to get every single one of his memories for the past 5 years. And they discover exactly the identities of these kids. So they're about to board onto some subways in Times Square. They're immediately greeted by Homeland Security, who catches them all, and there's absolutely zero incident. The virus is locked down, no problem. However, it was part of a bigger network of terrorists from across different nations, and they were all actually gathering in a single location in Dubai to celebrate when the attacks get launched. So Unknown Soldier puts on a face that matches Zari and takes his place, having been able to download all of his memories into his head and perfectly mimic his accent. And they find out that the terrorists, while they are all here to celebrate that, they're all actually going to launch independent plans that Zari was not made privy to beforehand. So Unknown Soldier has to make a judgment call. He starts attacking the heads of these terrorist states that are there, trying not to kill them because that's not what was supposed to happen. He was supposed to have them all captured so that they could all, face their day in court. But he does have to make some extra things in order to stop the attack in time. So gunfire lets out. It's just a whole big thing. Eventually, Unknown Soldier has to take off his face. He reveals himself. And there's a lot of dead bodies, but there are still some people left alive. And the Unknown Soldier talks to his handler saying, they have a global attack. You have to stop. And he's yeah, we were listening to the whole thing. We're clearing out all the embassies that were targeted. You're good. You did a good job today. You're the best Unknown Soldier we've ever had. And he puts him on a plane for repairs to his body because he got shot a lot. So he has another nightmare about his family, and his family's chewing him out you're not doing this to avenge us. You're doing this because it makes you feel better. This has nothing to do with us anymore. Move on. So then we get to 2 days later. He's back up. He's walking again, and his handler says, like, yes, you are one in a line of unknown soldiers. There have been some before you. Let me show you something. And she takes him into this room, and he goes, my God, this is impossible. But that's the leaving off from there. We don't know what he saw inside that room. Very fast. This book, it doesn't read too fast. Like, it's a normally paced book, but like just in terms of plot beats, it's just boom, 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 boom. It's just going, and like as soon as it's done, like it introduced those kids crossing into New York, and then 3 pages later, okay, they were caught, no problem. But then we also have this other thing, okay, but then it's taken care of. Like, it's so fast. It's so quick moving. It's incredible. Art style fits the tone. Personally, I'm not a fan of how scratchy it is, but I can appreciate that it is the tone that they're wanting to set for this book. All in all, yeah, it's fine. It's okay. It's setting up some deeper lore now in terms of, oh, you're not the first unknown soldier. And I think this could really benefit from that in setting up this more overarching narrative rather than just, here's this terrorist threat. Oh, okay, we took care of it. Here's the next one. So I'm looking forward to seeing if they do that. All in all, this particular set of issues, I would go ahead and I'll give it a 6.5. It's very close to a 7, but honestly, it does feel just too unfocused right now in that every single time a threat pops up, it's just immediately dealt with. I want there to be a longer form story being told here, and I think we're about to get it, but otherwise it is a perfectly fine story. So 6.5, we'll see where it goes. Unholy Matrimony, written by Justin Gray and Jimmy Palmiotti, art by Jose Luis Garcia Lopez. This is a Batlash story. It is the backup to All-Star Western number 10, and it's more of just a character piece on who in the hell Batlash is, rather than any sort of real story. So we open up at a wedding, and Batlash is in the middle of just a brawl, and he's like, yeah, it's pretty much my life. This is just how I do. I'm a professional gambler and a ladies' man. And we see how someone's accusing him of cheating, and then he is caught in bed with a woman by that woman's sister, who says, you're cheating on me with my sister. And then we see what I can only assume is a few hours later is him in bed with both of them and their father catching him saying, I'm gonna kill you. So throughout all this, the brawl continues on, and he's like, yeah, I have my weaknesses. I'm not perfect, but gosh darn it, I sure am close. So then we get him being born, and he's in his little baby carriage, and he's surrounded by a bunch of women, all of which have very low-cut tops. And it's just like, yeah, that's pretty much where it all began for me. We then see him visiting the grave of who I can only assume are his parents, and he doesn't say anything about him. He just says, his exact words here are, among the numerous lessons learned in my travels is the indisputable fact that life is short and the Bible is most often read at grave sites. So there's that. Anyway, so then the actual story that kicks off here, if you can call it that, is that one of their sisters fell pregnant, and he was supposed to marry her out of wedlock, shotgun wedding, and he's obviously dragging his feet. He's not willing to. The father's like forcing him up there, saying like, you're going to get up there or else I'm going to kill you. And so he's forcing her up there, but then he makes a call of like, now hold on, I posit that until the birth of that baby, you can't say that it's definitely mine. And they're like, who else could it be? And he's like, but here's the thing. The sisters are identical twins. However, they're not actually identical. The one sister keeps her nails a lot less clean than the other sister does. And as such, I would say that I noticed that, and I know that I slept with this sister and not that sister. And at this point, the baby starts coming. So it's all pretty much a moot point. So Batlash delivers the baby, and the baby is significantly uglier than Batlash in his own words. So he's like, well, that proves it can't be mine. So they say whose baby it is, and the sister knows that it belongs to a man named Mike Stetler who died earlier on. So they were just trying to con Batlash into being the father, so that way they would be taken care of. Because, of course, with the father dead back in those days, there's not much you can do. But at that point, Batlash is like, well, I've cleared my name. So long, everybody. And as he's leaving town, there's a funeral procession for the man who died, because I guess it was very recently. He picks a little daisy off of the casket and makes his way out of town. So, yeah, that's Badlash. Interesting character, definitely not likable, but an interesting one at the very least. I'm not opposed to it. Like it's a fine enough told story. I think that it faltered in a few places just because it took so long to just establish like what kind of character Badlash is, that by the time you get to the story, oh, and by the way, his name is like Bartholomew something Lash, so that's why people call him Batlash. Has nothing to do with Batman. So yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting character. I think it just took too long to get to the actual like story, and the story itself was like whatever. It did a good job of at least characterizing him. I brushed over a lot of it, but it did do a good job of saying how, he's drinking his own Kool-Aid so much that he genuinely thinks he is this amazing. But it's an interesting story at the very least. So overall, I'll give it a 6. As for the art, Jose Luis Garcia Lopez, fantastic artist, does a great job here. I think it fits the tone, and everything is very clear of what I'm looking at, and yeah, it's a clean, nicely drawn story that honestly I feel was a bit too light on the story. So 6, and we'll see if Batlash ever appears again, though I doubt it. The Haunted Highwayman, starring Dr. Terrence 13, written by Justin Gray and Jimmy Palmiotti, art by Scott Collins. This is a new character as far as I can tell, and he is a scientist, but we don't open up on him. We open up on a wealthy couple who are making their way by stagecoach outside of Gotham City when they are stopped on the road by a ghostly figure riding a horse and holding a huge rifle. And he says, "All right, this is a holdup. You must pay the highwayman." And they say, "Now see here." To which point the highwayman then shoots an inferno out of his gun. Also, he glows, so that's a thing. So the next day, the wealthy man, Mr. Wimbley, comes in with some law people, and he's like, "Dr. Terrence 13, you are a brilliant scientist, but can you help us with this ghost problem?" He's like, "Are you kid? It's not a ghost. There's no such thing as ghosts. Why would a ghost need money? Clearly, this is just a thief, a very smart thief, but just a thief. So, yeah, no, I'll totally help you out, but I'm not helping because I think I'm catching a ghost. I'm helping because this is clearly a smart man who, for some reason or another, is taking up a life of crime rather than using his gifts for good use." So he gets all dolled up in a waistcoat and a top hat, and he makes his way out, and they take an empty stagecoach in the middle of the night, take it down the highway, and then, wouldn't you know it, Highwayman shows up, and he's like, "Aha, everyone out of the coach." But it, turns out it's empty, and all the lawmen are surrounding in on the highwayman. So he uses a gun again, and he shoots fire at all of them, and all of them are immediately terrified to the point where they accidentally let the highwayman go. And Terrence 13's coat's on fire, but he's like, "You idiots, go after him. This is just fire. It's nothing special." But they're like, "But he glowed. How do you explain the glowing?" To which they see a pile of glowing goo on the ground, and Terrence 13 picks it up, and he's like, "All right, yeah, I was pretty sure about this, but now I'm definitely sure. Come on, guys. I know where we can at least look for him." So they go to the local college, and they talk to the headmaster, and they're like, "Oh, hello. I need to know if you have any professors or students that have access to strontium aluminate and sphalerite." To which point the headmaster's like, we just fired a guy because he was doing some unsavory things. And when we checked in on our storeroom afterwards, we found those things missing. And they're like, "All right, do you know the name of the guy and where he lives?" And his name is Jonathan Rude, to which he lives out on the outskirts of Slaughter Swamp. They go down to his house, and they hear an argument inside between him and a woman. Woman thinks that he's stepping out at night cheating on her, and he's like, "No, it's nothing like that. It's just another job I had to take after I was fired from the university." But at that point, Terrence and Lawman bust in, and they're like, "Hey, you're under arrest. You are the highwayman." And he's like, "What's the meaning of this?" And they find his fire gun, to which point he immediately fires his pistol off on one of the lawmen. Terrence wrestles him to the ground, tries grabbing the gun, and when he does, the gun goes off and shoots his wife. And we find out that his wife had some sort of illness and was confined to a wheelchair. And the only reason that he was doing this money and like worked as a scientist was to try to find a cure for her illness. But now she's dead, and Jonathan Root blames Terrence 13 for shooting her. And he's like, that wasn't me. You're the one who shot. And all of this happened because you made these poor choices. So then we see sometime later, he's been tried, he's been found guilty, and he is being set to hang. And they ask him if he has any last words. And Jonathan looks out at Terrence 13 in the crowd, and he curses him and his entire bloodline, and then is promptly hanged. To which point the other lawman is like, you don't believe in any of that curse stuff, do you? And he's like, no, not at all. Like, it literally doesn't bother me at all. And he explains Sherlock Holmes style how he came to the conclusion of, like, oh, here's what I think he used to glow, and here's how I came to this conclusion, and blah, blah, blah. And that's how he managed to track it back to how it had to be someone at the university, because they're the only ones who would have this stuff. But in the end, he finally sits down and he's like, yeah, no, I don't believe in curses. This was all his fault. His choices drove him down this path, and he has to live and die with those consequences. So, yeah, that's Terrence 13. As far as I know, that's an original character. I did briefly look it up on the wiki, and it said first appearance. So that might just be a first appearance for the New 52 sort of thing, which would be the case. But if it is an original character, it's an interesting concept of a Sherlock Holmes sort of character, but very much also like a Doc Brown, where he does all this crazy science stuff in the background. I would be interested to read that sort of character. I think this was a solid enough first entry into, okay, there's a bunch of supernatural stuff and he just has to uncover it. I'm liking that character. Art-wise, Scott Collins does a great job. It fits the tone perfectly. It's a creepy atmosphere, but not like too terribly dark, because it is still fun in the long run. It is still just a fun little story of, oh, let's Scooby-Doo gang this out. So all in all, I'm going to go ahead and say this one is a 7. I did very much enjoy it. It is a shame that it's such a short little backup. Hopefully, Terrence 13. They did briefly mention him having a meeting with Dr. Arkham, because this does take place in Gotham. So it is entirely possible that Terrence 13 will show up in the actual All-Star Western book proper. And in that case, I am more than happy to welcome him to the cast roster. But till such a time, we'll see where he shows up next. When Dinosaurs Walked the Earth Epilogue, written by Fabian Nicieza, art by Jorge Jimenez. So this is the backup to Teen Titans number 12, which is the epilogue to DC Universe Presents number 12, which had a prologue as the backup of Teen Titans number 11. I didn't know that the prologue was a backup. I thought it was just part of the normal story because it was all printed together in the book. So I'm just doing the epilogue now. For anybody who missed the episode on DC Universe Presents number 12, Kid Flash stumbled across a trio of half-human, half-dinosaur kids. One was named Terry. He is the cool one, but kind of a loner. One is Dak, I believe, who is a girl and Terry is interested in her. And then one is Staggs, who's a meathead, and Dak is interested in him, but he is only interested in wiping out all mammals on Earth and replacing them with dino people. So they go off, the Dak and Staggs go off, and they start doing their evil plan, and Terry's like, no, I have to stop them, and Kid Flash is working with them. Okay, so this issue picks up with Terry in the sewers fighting off some, like, heavily mutated lizards and birds that are now like half dinosaur pretty much, and he goes through, fights them off. Kid Flash shows up to save him at the last second, knocks out the lizard thing, puts him in some Star Labs handcuffs that Kid Flash admits that he just stole, and it's just like, all right, that worked out pretty well, so where's your friends? Have you come across them yet? And he's like, no, I haven't, which means that I probably have to go to that place you warned me about, the terrifying place known as New Jersey. And then we see that a snake was watching them this whole time, and the snake is grabbed by Dak, who brings it to Staggs and says, hey, I found another one. And they douse some of the hyper-evolution juice on it, which then turns it into another lizard person thing. And then Staggs like, aha, join the growing army that will reclaim the planet for Earth for our kind. And then that's it. And that's where that wraps up. I really should have read this with the other issue, but I didn't because I thought it would have a little more substance than that. It genuinely, why is this here? I don't understand. Like, they did nothing. They did actually nothing here at all. So, except show that, like, they're still in town. They're not in Jersey. They're, like, just down the sewage line. So, whatever. It's a 5. Like, it's not offensive. I like Jorge Jimenez's art. And Fabian Nicieza does a good job of making Kid Flash just annoying enough that you know he's supposed to be annoying, but not annoying to the point where I dislike reading him. Like, I just recognize that he is that sort of character. So it's decent all around, but there's just nothing to it. I genuinely have nothing to grip my teeth into on this. So I'm just going to give it a 5 because there's just, it exists for the sole purpose of existing. Not to forward any plot, not to do anything else. It just says, yeah, these guys will come up again soon. Probably. So, yeah, look out for that. And that's it. That is all of the backup issues that have come out over the past 3 months, thus wrapping up our fantastic 1-year anniversary show. However, before I sign off, there are a few little changes that I'm going to be making over the course of this next year of episodes. But before I get into that, I do just want to tell you the comics that will be coming out next week. So, next week starts DC Comics 0 month, where the editors have decided to give every single issue that is coming out of their main line a 0 issue that will show some more of the origins of these new versions of beloved characters. And next week we have our first 0 issues with Detective Comics, Batwing, Action Comics, Green Lantern, Earth 2, Green Arrow, World's Finest, GI Combat, Stormwatch, Animal Man, Dial H, and Swamp Thing. Additionally, we have a brand new series coming out with a 0 issue, The Phantom Stranger, which I believe will be tying into the future Trinity War event. And we have the end of a miniseries in Night Force number 7, which I'm hoping I can understand by then. But with that all out of the way, let me tell you the changes that are going on in this show. If you're listening to the audio version, pretty much nothing. I'm hoping to make it slightly better quality, but that's about all I can offer you. If you're watching the video version, again, pretty much nothing. However, you will notice some little cosmetic changes on the layout here. Most importantly, if you're watching the video version, you may notice that for the past year, I've been wearing this Batman shirt. And I have decided that, you know what? I'm going to change it up for the next year. I'm going to do this every year because I think doing my laundry once per year is pretty much okay with me. So I looked forward in the schedule and I looked to see what the most important thing over the next year is. And it's a little debatable, but I think it can really come down to the fact that Geoff Johns is going to be wrapping up his epic Green Lantern run with 2 different back-to-back events. So in honor of Geoff Johns ending his flagship series, we're going green, baby. So, if you have any thoughts on my fancy pants new shirt and or any comics, even if that's a little bit more boring, feel free to hit me up on Twitter at DC Comics Podcast. That is all one word, at DC Comics Podcast. Additionally, we have a Patreon that you can put money into and get stuff out of it like a vending machine. That is Mild Fuzz TV, all one word, Mild Fuzz TV. Again, as I said in the beginning, thank you very much for tuning in. It really does mean a lot to me to have made this an entire year. I genuinely do not know why I do it. It is something deep inside of me that has to be let out. It is some sort of horrific eldritch beast that has to let me inform you of what happened in these comics. And hopefully it will never die. But thank you very much again for watching. And always try to remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.